Come on. There it is. Okay. We're reconvening into public session after we've been meeting in an executive session. And so let's do roll call again.
Eric here.
Ben here.
Dusty here. Brian here.
Sarah here.
And Earl is here. Kate is absent. She's in Hawaii doing her reserve work, military reserve work stuff. So we will move on without her. With that, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the republic.
Stands.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. It's only the minutes, so I'll entertain a motion to.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Gusty, second by Terry, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Next, we have the regular agenda. Do we have any amendments?
No, sir. I'll make a motion just for the agenda.
Eric second.
Eric.
Eric, okay. Motion by Terry, second by Eric, all in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Is there anyone on board that has a conflict of interest on any agenda item tonight? Okay. Next, this is section of public comment. So if there's anyone here that would like to address the council on any issues that are not on our agenda tonight, now would be the time.
I have a letter that citizen wanted to be read into public comment.
Okay.
It's from Dan and Shelley Bellum, 470 Pine Street, Minturn. It's to Minturn Town Council. We asked that this letter be read into public comment and attached to the permanent record with the photographs attached. We are writing to express our concerns regarding an incident involving Martinez Trucking and plowing cars in at St. Patrick's Parish. We understand that the parking lot is considered private property. We have had a long-standing agreement with the church that allows us to use the use of the property when services are not being held. Additionally, the conditional use permit, which allowed the parish center to be constructed in a residential neighborhood, allowed for the public to use this lot for purposes other than attending events. St. Patrick Parish Center was constructed for the purpose of special events and occasional services. They were required to provide parking attendance each time the building is in use. The church has been allowed to hold regular Sunday services, and parking requirements have not been enforced under the conditions of their approval. However, the original documents outlined in the conditions of their approval seem to have been removed from the town offices, and minutes of their approval are nowhere to be found. I digress. The intent of this letter is to bring concerns related to this plow service to the town's attention by effectively blocking vehicles into the parking lot. The contractor is illegally imprisoning the owners of the vehicles and prevent them from relocating their vehicles or exiting in a safe manner in the event of a medical emergency. This is not how we treat our neighbors. Mr. Martinez stated that he had a problem with us for 28 years, yet could not tell us what we were doing wrong. We are not the only people who have been impacted by this immature behavior, and we have seen customers from local establishments have their cars impounded by this reckless behavior. This past Saturday, Mr. Martinez blocked our child's vehicle in the parking lot. He was not attempting to clear the lot. He was just being a jerk. Not only did he block the vehicle, he attempted to run my family down with his plow truck and was stopped by the Eagle County Sheriff's Office. While there may not be anything you can do to prevent this behavior, we would like this behavior to be documented in a record. The town has a responsibility to protect our citizens. Feel free to reach out to us should you have any questions. Dan and Shelley Bellum.
Thank you, Gusty. Come on up, Robert. Please state your name and address, please.
Robert Martinez with Martinez Trucking. I live at the 800 South Main Street. And I would like to reply from what Danny Bellum has wrote on the letter. It's private property. And I have to do a job for any business in town, doesn't matter what time it is. It snows, who knows when, where, what time. And I have talked to Danny Bellum 25, 28 years ago and said, you know, if it snows, just park on the side of the road. When I'm done, you can park right back on. So the instant I have to push the snow across Pine Street into the other lot for the Catholic Church's bare lot, and I couldn't do it. And we had almost 2 feet of snow. So I'm pushing it, and he came out. He was very vocal, saying the F-bomb and telling me that I couldn't do that. And I told him it's private property. There's signs there stating no parking from 2 to 11, and I was there at 8 o'clock. So I was the one who called the Eagle County deputy, Valdez. Valdez came up and said, "You're in the right, plow them in." So that's what I did. And that's what I do with everybody else who's in, that they won't let me do my job. And the way that Bellums look at it is plow around us, come back, bill it back to the church. And I told them, that's not the way that I do my business. I'm there to get the whole lot cleared, not to do partial, come back, rebuild the Catholic Church. So that's how this has happened. But this has been going on for 25, 28 years. It's a constant deal. I mean, you could talk to any deputy. This happens 2 to 3 times a season with this guy. He always parks there. And anybody knows that if we're going to be getting any type of snowfall, park on the side of the road. Get off the parking lot. Let me do my job. The church needs it. And I'm just doing my job. And I got pictures where he started shoveling snow. This has been going on, like I said, 25, 28 years. And I got pictures. If you want to look at them, I'll give them to you. He shovels from his driveway across the street into the church lot. I got pictures. I told Officer Valdez. Officer Valdez went and talked to Danny, and they got into it because he has no snow storage on his lot. So this is the ongoing thing. I got to deal with his snow that he's pushing onto the snow onto the parking area. The church calls me and says, "I thought you plowed." I plowed. He keeps moving the snow over. The flyers that you guys sent out back in October, November, you know, that's illegal anyway. And he's been doing it for 25, 28 years. And with his vehicle being parked there and with Officer Valdez saying, "Well, plow him in then." I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. And if I was in the wrong, I would have got a citation. You know, I don't want to call a tow truck and have them pay $300, $400, $500. That's not me. You know, I've been dealing with this guy, like I said, 25 years. Gussie knows. So anyway, that's my response. That what would you do if somebody's parked in your driveway and your snow plower has to come and plow and can't get to your spot? What would you do? That's the way that I look at it. But I'm just doing my job. You know, I don't have anything against the guy, but he just doesn't want to follow protocol and park on the side of the road. He can park there after when I'm done plowing. But 25, 28 years this has been going on.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other public comment? Jay, do you have anybody on Zoom land? Jay,
We do not have anybody online.
okay, thank you. Roy, this is public comment time if you were coming in to make a comment. If not, we'll go on to the next one. Okay. Okay, council comments and committee reports.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on to that, a point of order, there is, I think, a statement that we need to make upon reconvening after the executive session now that we're in open session.
Go ahead.
That's a statement you're going to read.
Oh, Ben. Oh, you're absolutely right. My apologies. Okay, so we have reconvened out of open session. The time is now 10 till 6. And the executive session has been concluded. The participants in the executive session were myself, council members Terry Armstead, Lynn Feiger, Gusty Kanakis, Brian Rodine, and Eric Gotthelf, town manager Michelle Mateer, town attorney Mike Sawyer, and water attorney Susan Bryant. For the record, if any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into executive session occurred during the executive session, or that any improper action occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I would ask that you state your concerns for the record. Hearing none, we move on to the next agenda. Thank you, Michael. Next item is council comments, committee reports. Eric has nothing. Lynn, do you have anything? Okay.
Oh, anything either?
You want me to cover the
Yeah.
fitness center board?
Yeah.
Okay. This is probably something that we'll want to add as a discussion item in a future meeting. But we had a meeting of the Minturn Fitness Center board 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And we're still working through some of the I'll say it again, that the board and our relationship with Ski Club Vale is in better shape and in, I think, working with each other in better faith than it's ever been. And we're seeing, increased use and better financial stability in the center. In that collaboration, and we're to the point where there are actually there's revenue coming in, which is a great place to be. And so we are now working through the bylaws that were written and figuring out the best way to account for a couple of things moving forward. One would be investment in a capital reserve account, which is delineated in the bylaws as something we should be doing. And then also looking at the order of reimbursing costs incurred by the town and Ski Club Vale over the past multiple years when we were running a deficit over there. So there's a lot to untangle in that, and I think we're gonna have a bigger discussion on the council and really want some community input on some short-term, medium-term, long-term vision on that relationship and use of the center, and some other questions, and we continue to work through that. So kind of my update there.
Thank you, Brian.
Brian, I'm so sorry, Brian, you meeting with Commissioner Bowman?
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about that
Okay.
as well. I reached out to on a personal level, not saying that not on behalf of town council, just as a resident, I noticed an article regarding the Avon Highway 6 kind of situation with CDOT and trying to put there was some local press coverage on trying to install some pedestrian infrastructure, transit, things like that. And there was a lot of frustration in that article from local officials regarding some of the limitations and lack of communication that have been coming from CDOT. So I reached out and wrote a letter to our representatives, Lukens and Dylan Roberts. And Representative Roberts, State Rep Roberts, wrote back and suggested I contact Barbara Bowman within the last meeting. I said that we were going to try to invite in for a meeting. She wrote back and asked for just a call first, which was to kind of delineate things and understand her role. Michelle and I were on a call with her last week. She brought in a couple of new contacts to both of us from CDOT, both out of the Grand Junction regional office, as far as I could understand. And they, we kind of outlined some of our some of the feedback that we're hearing from the community. Like we, constantly hear concerns about safety on 24. We have, as a council, tried to make some moves on infrastructure and safety infrastructure, bulb outs, things like that. And locally not had a lot of positive response from CDOT, but this call went really well. And it seems like they want to move pretty quickly in getting somebody up here to do a walkthrough of our community 24. Sounds like they did something similar 10 to 12 years ago. But we're trying to actively get somebody up here pretty quickly, right? Did we
It's
get
actually scheduled
Did we
for next Tuesday, the
next Tuesday?
13th. They're coming up from the Grand Junction office, so it was real progress.
Yeah, and so it was really just lovely to hear kind of a different agreeable tone from CDOT. So we're really hopeful and optimistic on walking through town and kind of showing them Highway 24 and the new bike park and how kids are crossing the street there and our bus stops and things like that, and just helping them understand some of the issues our community faces.
Good job, Ryan. Appreciate that. How about that? Okay, you got nothing?
Nada.
Okay, well, once again, with that dump that we had recently, kudos to Public Works and all the contractors that assisted here and there in our community. Good job, because things got cleaned up pretty quick. So good on that. With that, there's no other comments. We'll move on to the manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My manager's report is in the packet. If anyone has any questions on items in that report, I'm happy to field those questions. I was privileged to take a trip to Washington, D.C. last week to represent the town of Minturn, as the mayor was out of the country. So I represented the town of Minturn on the mayor and the council's behalf in support of the Bolt Stitch Act, which the council signed on to as part of the ERWSD UERWA Town of Minturn IGA as part of the Bolt Ditch Reservoir that we did. It was interesting and educational to be a part of that process and be in the congressional subcommittee hearing where Siri Roman was able to testify in support of that act. Additionally, I listened in on railway hearing today for the subcommittee at the state level, where they are trying to increase restrictions for railways going through Colorado, length of the rail, more safety features that have to be added to rail. Minturn is obviously in support of this legislation to occur. Also today, I attended a luncheon to learn more about the Shoshone water right. This is a water right being purchased by Colorado River District, which will be in effect utilized by Colorado Water Conservation Board. The cost is $98.5 million. This is a very forward-thinking act, so that, decades from now, there will still be water in rivers when there may or may not be an active plant at the Shoshone River. I got the impression that one of the things that may come out of this is continued calls on the river at that location with one of the most senior water rights in Colorado. So it was a very educational luncheon to take part in, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Will they continue to use the power plant there?
For now, it's used by Xcel Energy, yes.
It's gonna sunset in a particular year or?
Not at this time.
Is this the for recreation purposes? And is that the purpose of buying the water right, is to preserve recreation through that corridor?
There are multiple purposes for that water right. One is recreation, another is agriculture, another is municipal, and another is for in-stream flow and environmental health of the river. Thanks. Yeah.
Any other questions for Michelle? Okay, we'll move on.
Oh,
Oh,
Gusty. And we need to fill a Northwest cog seat.
Okay, thank you.
And I even had it written down here, so I have been remiss. Since Councilmember George Broden seat became vacant, which was some time ago, Gusty has been doing double time with Northwest cog and water quality quantity seats. So the Northwest Colorado Council of Governments seat has opened. This is an opportunity to take this seat. I reached out to council a while back, asking for anybody that was interested to reach out to Gusty, talk about what this seat does, what the council does, and how this might be a great value for anybody that might be interested in filling this seat. So I thought I'd see if there's anyone interested. Once we go through the elections on April 2nd, we'll look to have a complete overhaul of committee seats, but for the interim, we would like to get this seat filled.
Well, Eric, you're the newbie. Only with a newbie, but a newbie. Was that a volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank
I'll be in touch.
All right. Of course, Kate was open for that too, because she's not here. so-
She's
I thought we were putting her on that.
Right.
I
Oh,
assumed she was on it, so.
That would have been tradition,
Mhm.
but thank you, Eric.
Okay. All right, next we have business items, which ties into a presentation. We have Gina McCracken, manager of the the Climate Action Collaborative. And Will Bauer as well. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks. And Michelle, are you able to pull up the presentation or should we do that on our end?
Jay, can you pull up that presentation, or is it better if Gina does it on her end?
Either way, I'm not sure what the presentation is. It's not on the agenda,
Oh,
but I can add it very easily.
no, Gina, why don't you pull that up?
Yeah. Thank you.
Should I just zoom in? Would that be the easiest?
Yeah, if you go to the Zoom link and he'll pull you up as a panelist, it's just right in the packet, so.
Starts on page 12.
Michelle, can I ask while we're pulling that up, who's currently serving on the Climate Action Collaborative committee for us?
Earl and Brian.
Thank you.
Earl, I think is the secretary or the,
Vice Chair.
I'm so sorry to minimize your role.
I am
Yeah,
in the webinar if they can move me up.
they wouldn't let me say no.
So Jay, if you could promote Will to a panelist, he can share his screen and share the presentation, which is also located in the packet. Oh, second.
Perfect.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, Jay.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. It's wonderful to see some familiar faces here. Thanks for having Will and I. I'm Gina, for those of you that might not know me. And I manage the Climate Action Collaborative for Eagle County Communities. Will is the CAC coordinator. And I feel like this is a very water themed agenda, so I'm glad that we're keeping it on theme with this presentation. Today, we're going to present you some data that we ran for the town of Minturn related to the Water Energy Next this year and your water treatment and distribution systems, and then present some recommendations for both customer outdoor water conservation as well as operational efficiencies that can be used to decrease greenhouse gas impacts from those operations. Next slide. Awesome. Just want to start us off by grounding us in our countywide greenhouse gas reduction goals. Our current goals are to see a 50% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and an 80% by 2050. And in our climate action plan, which you can always refer to and find on the CAC website, are the strategies and tasks that we have to complete really in order to meet these goals. Next slide. Just some background on why we embarked on the journey of creating these reports for communities. So water and wastewater treatment and distribution processes are really energy intensive. We'll get into some details around what that looks like for the town of Minturn, but across the board, these processes are very energy intensive. And so there is a greenhouse gas impact there. Often when we're talking about the relationship between climate change and water, it normally looks like climate change is having an impact on our snowpack, therefore we have less reliable water. But there's also kind of that inverse relationship where some of the operations that we're using to both treat and then distribute that water are causing emissions, which is adding another feedback loop into that cycle. So we really wanted to better associate what that impact looked like for our communities that are outside of the Eagle River Water and Sanitation District boundaries. To do so, we created a calculator that could analyze both the electricity and natural gas inputs into both of these water and wastewater treatment and distribution systems. And that'll give us a threshold, which will elaborate on in a little bit to explain what those impacts look like here in our community. And then also found within the report are recommendations for customer facing and then operational strategies that can be used to reduce those impacts. Next slide.
Switch.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So I'm going to go over some of the data that we have found from the Water Energy Nexus. So here are the results. They might be a little bit small, but hopefully they're available in the packet for all of you. And as you can see, we looked at both the electricity and natural gas from from water treatment and distribution, as well as wastewater. But since Minturn does not treat its own wastewater, obviously there was no information there. And the water treatment facility does run solely on electricity. There's no natural gas there. So all the emissions that we can see here are from electricity and electricity alone. I want to give a shout out to Cindy, who I don't think is here, but she was very helpful in getting all of the data that we needed to create this calculator. So I just wanted to thank her while we were here. And the way the calculator works is pretty simple. We choose the utility provider, so in Minturn's case, Xcel Energy, and then we do that, or we then select the correct year that we're looking at. So we looked at 2018 through 2020. And we make sure that we get the correct carbon intensity from the energy mix that's going into the electricity that year. So Xcel is working towards renewable energy goals. I believe their goal is 80 or 90% renewable by 2030. So every year they're hopefully increasing that renewable energy percentage and being less carbon intensive. From there, we plug in the amount of electricity used, as well as the amount of water treated and distributed. And then we can come out with these numbers kind of after running the data. Looking at Minturn's emissions data, total energy emissions stay relatively constant year over year. It's equivalent to between about 9.3 and 12.5 cars on the road per year. Kind of a visualization for how many emissions are coming from treating water for folks at Minturn. Emissions per kilogallon is a little less consistent, and we'll look at some graphs here in a moment to kind of illustrate that. But for reference, 1 gallon of gasoline produces 19.6 pounds of CO2. So hopefully that kind of puts things in perspective a little bit when it comes to these numbers. Next slide. Perfect. So for data analysis, this is for total energy emissions. You can see the relative consistency year over year. And I wanted to point out that the large leak that was on the Service North Main in 2022 didn't seem to disrupt emissions in any particular fashion, which I found to be kind of interesting. Next slide. Perfect. Total energy emissions per kilogallon is a little bit different. So this factors in the amount of gallons that are being treated and distributed every year. And we can see that it kind of varied, especially during COVID. The emissions tended to spike a little bit and seem to be returning maybe a little bit more towards normal here in 2022 and 2023. We'll certainly need to look at more data to see what how this consistency or inconsistency looks over time, but that was just sort of my initial reaction looking at this, a little less consistent than the total energy emissions. I will say that Minturn's energy emissions per kilogallon are relatively consistent, as we've seen in other data that we've looked at from across the country. There's an academic paper published about the state of California that analyzes various water treaters. And they found that greenhouse gas emissions per kilogallon was between 0.617 and 2.5 pounds of CO2e per kilogallon. And Minturn is relatively in a similar range. So I would say overall doing things well here, or at least in line with what folks in California are doing. Next slide. As I was looking over the data, I did notice an interesting anomaly. So if you look at the year 2020 in the months of February through May, which are highlighted in yellow, you'll notice that the total energy consumption is nearly double that of previous years and then the years after. But at the same time, water treated significantly drops by almost 11 million gallons or 11,000 kilogallons. I assume that the amount of water being treated dropped due to COVID. That would be my best assumption. But I thought it was interesting that the electricity consumption jumped so high. If the town is interested, there might be some possible investigating to do, figure out why this.
I know, we didn't take showers.
Ah,
We just were in our sweatpants.
I see.
We were really cranking on Netflix.
Yeah, okay. In the water treatment facility specifically, that's where Earl hid out during COVID. Well, anyway, yeah, that might be something to look into. It seems like back now in 2022, which is the last year we analyzed, things have returned back to a little bit more normal, but just something to point out. And maybe keep tabs on year over year. In conclusion, next slide. In terms of emissions per gallon are similar to calculations from across the country. And Minturns relatively low energy intensive slow sand filter system for the water produces or uses relatively little energy to treat. So that's something that's good. But if Minturn was to construct a process packaged water treatment plant or membrane filtration system plant, as has been at least talked about, most likely energy consumption and therefore emissions will increase to some degree. We recommend that you continue to compare energy consumption and water treatment often to observe any anomalies or discrepancies and hopefully eliminate that so the town isn't spending more money than they need to.
So, right back. Okay, now on to some recommendations, starting with customer facing. Go to the next slide. So the first of which is updating rate structures to a tiered system. So utilities that commonly use this practice will utilize a single family equivalent fixed fee, which is saying, you know, this is the fee that everybody pays per household. And then there's a tiered rate per kilogallons of water that are utilized within that single family household. This is a similar structure to what Eagle River Water and Sanitation District updated to. And this just makes the process more equitable across the board, doesn't allocate more water to larger homes. It says everybody pays this fixed fee. And then if you continue to use above the tier that is cheapest for kilogallons, then you pay more money. How it applies to the town, it's my understanding that you utilize a tiered structure for outdoor irrigation accounts, which is awesome. I think that's the best way to do it, to disincentivize excessive water use, especially for that outdoor irrigation. But this can also be applied to residential / indoor accounts. And this could be done by applying that single family equivalent and then utilizing a tiered rate structure. Next slide, please. Just wanted to provide an example of what this looks like at the water district. You'll see on that first image there, the bottom, that's the fixed fee that folks are paying for wastewater. And then from there, if you're using 0 to 6 kilogallons, that the additional fee associated with that is shown on the right-hand side of that below image, and then it goes up from there. So really just disincentivizing that excessive water use. The cost for the town to do something like this is relatively low, but the impact is quite high because you're really attaching money and dollars to that excessive water use. Next slide. Implementing smart metering. So smart metering technology really just analyzes what's going on at the water meter level. It can detect for things like leaks and excessive water use. Just a great way to collect data accurately and in real time. It's my understanding that Minturn is almost complete updating meters within the town to smart metering technology. The best way to utilize this technology is to ensure that you have somebody that's analyzing it on a relatively consistent basis. So that way you can check for things like leaks and excessive use and know who your high users are and possibly direct some resources or advice their way. The cost to do this, as with most infrastructure upgrades, is quite high. And the benefit is medium simply because it's primarily a data collection mechanism and you really have to have an action associated with what that data is telling you to really get the impact out of that one. Next slide. Offering rebates and incentives for water efficiency is another great route to go. If you've noticed, there's a pretty big focus on outdoor water consumption. That's very intentional. Most of the water that comes out of our sinks could be captured by the water treaters and distributors and water utilities. So it's not really lost. But that outdoor water is oftentimes lost to the landscape and it doesn't come back into that system to be reused. And so that's really where we need to focus those water conservation efforts. As this relates to rebates and incentives, the Beyond Lawn program is a program by the Eagle River Watershed Council and the Conservation District. And they are offering rebates that are similar to what Water and Sanitation District offer, except for those outside of the Water and Sanitation District boundary. So those do apply to Town of Minturn residents. Be awesome to promote this to town residents. One thing that the Beyond Lawn program administrators are asking many of the communities for is matching rebate funds. So this would allow the town to contribute those match funds, increasing the dollar amount that residents can access for things like irrigation assessments and upgrades and perhaps turf removal rebates. The cost of this would be medium for the town, and the impact would be medium as well. Next slide. Promoting irrigation assessments. So irrigation assessments are a really awesome tool where an irrigation professional can come out to a large property, a small property, whatever that property looks like, and really take a look at the irrigated landscape as well as the irrigation system that's accompanying it. At the end of their analysis, they will give the homeowner or business owner, whomever it is, a detailed report with recommendations on things to do to both save water and save money. Most folks are actually overwatering their landscapes, and they're paying more to do so. And oftentimes when you're talking about water conservation and what the steps are to reduce that outdoor irrigated landscape, the first thing that any water professional will tell you to do is to get an irrigation assessment before you start thinking about removing any of your turf. So we really recommend promoting these to folks, especially if you know who your high water users are. Things that you can do are promote this at your website or at town events. Do an irrigation assessment of town properties, as well as directly promote the irrigation assessments to high outdoor water users. Cost is relatively low to do this kind of promotion, but the benefit is really high because, as we shared, many people are simply overwatering their landscapes. Next, we're going to jump into some operational recommendations for the town. You can go to the next slide. So energy efficiency, electrification, and renewable energy enrollment of the operation itself. We understand that the town is exploring infrastructure to upgrade the current water treatment system. So we do not, at this point in time, recommend making any infrastructure upgrades as they relate to renewable energy, energy efficiency, or electrification to what presently exists. But if and when that infrastructure does get upgraded, we highly recommend exploring all electric options, highly energy efficient buildings and infrastructure, and potentially enrolling in renewable energy programs that the utility or that the energy utility offers. Cost is high here, as all infrastructure upgrades are, but the benefit is extremely high as you'll reduce a lot of that emissions threshold for the water treatment and distribution process. Next. On-site offsets. So this is utilizing renewable energy on-site offsets to reduce the emissions associated with that infrastructure. Town of Eagle is a great example. They just invested some money into an on-site PV system that's going to reduce the emissions or essentially offset the emissions of their new water treatment plants. It's my understanding that Minturn is exploring a solar array at the consolidated tailings pile. So some or all of the energy produced from that solar array could be used to offset the future, more energy intensive water treatment infrastructure. Cost is high, benefit is also extremely high here. Next slide. Final thoughts. There are more recommendations that we've offered the town. These can all be found in that full report in the packet that includes some more detailed analysis on the data, as well as the full suite of recommendations for customer and operational efficiencies. Another final thought is that outdoor water conservation is really critical for our drought and unjaded region, and it has a greenhouse gas reduction impact. And water treatment and distribution are highly energy intensive. So doing what we can to make those processes more efficient and have less of a greenhouse gas impact will save the town both money and mitigate costs and energy burdens. Thanks. Happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just have a couple. First of all, I thank you very much for this, and I think a lot of these suggestions are really good, and a lot of them I think we're implementing or in the process of implementing. But I did have a couple of questions, and one of them that I did not understand at all. I understand why it might be a good thing to have a tiered water system based on water usage. But then you go on to tie that to square footage. And I don't understand that piece at all, because, I mean, you might have a larger home with many more users. And if you had a tiered system, they're paying more for their extra use anyway. Why would there be a specific additional charge you would want to do? Plus the fact that we in town, in terms of fixed costs, do charge differently for homes 3,000 square foot and under, and homes 3,000 square foot and above pay double for, or up to for water taps.
Yeah. So the reason why we veered away from recommending, you know, the charges to be associated with square footages and more so just to give every household the same fixed fee is to really make that process more equitable, because in the prior format, larger homes were allocated more water allowance. So they were essentially paying less per kilogallon than some smaller homes. And so it's to make the process a bit more equitable by requiring a flat fixed fee across the board and then saying, okay, this is how much extra you pay if you're using excessive water.
But why use square footage rather than water use? That
It's-
doesn't
I
make
think
sense.
she's saying not use square. footage.
Yeah, it's to veer away from square footage so that single family equivalent, the SFE, is not really attached to square footage. It's attached to a definition of how that square or that single family equivalent is defined. So if you're in a 700 square foot apartment or a 3,000 square foot home, you pay the same fixed fee, and that's to cover, you know, infrastructure costs of the utility and to cover those baseline fees. And then from there, users pay more. So in theory, that 3,000 square foot home is going to be using more water, therefore paying more.
Okay, I'm still not following, but I'll move on. Because I think we're talking about tiered use. I'm tiered expense based on use anyway. And the other question I have is, I've heard that there are 2 users in Minturn that use about a third of our water. And I was wondering if you guys looked into that and have any recommendations with respect to that.
Yeah, we haven't taken a look at any particular water users within the town of Minturn. I think one of the first big things to look at is if you can understand or prove that the excessive use is coming from outdoor irrigation. I think another thing that can be done there is if it is outdoor irrigation related, really doing some outreach to those individuals and recommending that they do an irrigation assessment to understand what's going on and why there's so much irrigated landscape and water use. Another thing that can be done, which we didn't mention within the recommendations, but can be found in the full suite of recommendations in your packet, is you can request water benchmarking from those key accounts, from those folks that are using a lot of water. That essentially would require them to submit their water data, and you can hold them to efficiency standards and to water use standards and say, you know, by this date, water use has to be reduced by X amount. So I think that there are some strategies that the town could take up, but certainly starting with some education and outreach and sending resources their way. So that way they can start taking a look at why there is excessive use would be a helpful way to go.
So you think that benchmarking might be applied to, say, a user, for example, like a cemetery?
Typically, a benchmarking policy would be set across the board. It wouldn't be directed at a singular individual. You know, you could say water users that are using above, you know, X kilogallons a month have to benchmark their water usage. And then that would require all of those users to submit that water data. And then you would set a standard from there and say, you know, by this year, water use has to reduce by 25%, or however you would like to, you know, formulate that. And then that would require through policy, those high water users to reduce that water amount.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Excuse me, if I might just add on to that.
What?
If I might add on to that answer from Gina, staff is looking at bringing forward to the town council later this winter an updated outdoor irrigation and sprinkler water rate system. So we will be looking to mirror the ERWSD, UERWA irrigation and sprinkler rates system for how they bill outdoor irrigations. And that is done through a square footage system. It eliminates the multiplier that is often used. So if you have a really large area and possibly 10 SFEs, 20 SFEs, it eliminates that multiplier option of having 5 or 6 SFEs. Instead of, never making it to the 5th tier and really having that penalty of the excessive water use because you're always in tier 1 with all of your SFEs. This eliminates that option, and it then puts everyone on an equitable level based on the square footage, the amount of water you should be using based off of the Colorado Extension Office's review of the foliage. Is that the word I'm looking?
Irrigated landscape?
Great, Gina. Thank you for being here. And it says how much water you should actually be using versus how much water they are using. Anything above what you should be using, you're going to pay quite a bit for. So we'll be bringing that to you hopefully by this spring so that we can implement it before the summer watering season. Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
A quick question, just like looking at the energy use broken out by month, it seems like it's inversely related to actual use in town. Like the high points are February, January through May, and then our water use actually spikes in June through October. So that makes me think that it's probably facilities related and most likely heat related, would be my guess.
Yeah.
And I know that, we are looking at some improvements and changes to the water plant, but I wonder if, looking at, we probably spend back of the napkin 15 grand in electricity out there, if that's where this meter info is coming from, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Did Arnold and the crew get out there and like look at these numbers and say, oh, maybe are we leaving some space heaters on or some like really low hanging stuff out there that?
Yeah, I would be willing to say that we haven't taken that deeper dive yet,
Okay.
Which is merits taking a look.
Cool,
Yes.
because I think, all the conservation stuff is like super, super important to us moving forward. In terms of, I think, supply and on that side of things and future, water sizing of the plants, things like that. And then it does appear that the majority of the savings, both dollar and greenhouse gas, are going to be on the facility side, which is not surprising. And a lot of times you probably coming from a lot of previous energy efficiency stuff, it's like pretty amazing how some cheap or just operational or some timers can make big chunks and save things. So I would recommend it. Take these numbers and go poke around and see if you can figure out what exactly is causing these swings.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, for most municipalities, I believe the average municipality has like 35% of their municipal energy bill is coming from water treatment and distribution. So it tends to be a pretty high number. I think Minturn's in a different position because of the current operation. And that's why we were sharing, if and when that operation becomes more modernized and investments in infrastructure are made, that would be a great time to really hone in on investing in energy efficiency and electrification. Electrification more so for the greenhouse gas impact, but really if that system's efficient, it'll save a lot of money on those energy bills.
Anything else from the board? Great report, by the way. Some fascinating stuff in there, including with new construction, putting plumbing, irrigation water on a separate sub-meter.
Yeah, that's something.
Really intriguing.
Next level.
It'd be hard data for us when we're looking at.
Yeah.
Minturn North will be doing that as a development as part of their.
Okay.
So if I can, this is a really great example, and I want to say thank you to Gina and Will. This is a really great example of Minturn not having the internal bandwidth to do some of these things, and our outside partnerships and the organizations that we have the opportunity to work with kind of, helping us punch above our weight. So with this action plan, we have a resolution included for the council to support some of these items to start becoming implemented over the following years. So if council should deem worthy, we have a resolution for you to support this action plan and the activities therein.
So that brings us to the formal procedure of resolution number 5, series 2024, approving Minturn's Water Nexus report and action plan. Do we have is there any further discussion from the board before we ask for a motion? Okay.
I know the resolution.
This is a resolution. Well, it doesn't matter. Would there be anybody from the public who'd like to comment? Jay?
Okay, I'll make a resolution.
Sorry, I didn't get the button hit first. I have no hands raised.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2, series 2023, a resolution to approve the town of Minturn Water Nexus report and action plan.
I'll second that.
Motion by Terry, second by Gusty. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're rocking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Next is ordinance whatever, series 2024. And this immediately is being requested to do a continuance on it.
Yes, we have Scott Hun here with us this evening to make the formal request for continuance to a date certain.
Well, there's Scott.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. As many of you are probably aware, Mike and I have been working closely with representatives from Battle North pursuant to the settlement agreement to bring forth a set of code amendments to chapters 13, 16, 17, and 18. We have been working diligently with Battle North, and it's been a good process. We originally anticipated bringing that code amendment package before the Planning Commission on January 24th, and then before Town Council at tonight's meeting. We did not make the 24th meeting for the Planning Commission. At that meeting, the Planning Commission opened the hearing and then voted unanimously to table for review on the 14th. We are on track to have that code amendment package ready to go for next week's Planning Commission meeting. And so tonight's request is just to also have the council open the public hearing and then table or continue the review of this ordinance to February 21st.
Thank you. Any questions, Scott? Okay. So we do need to open this up to public hearing since this is an ordinance. So I'll open up the public hearing for any comment. Okay.
No, there's nobody with their hand raised.
Okay. Close the public hearing. So now I'll entertain a motion for continuance or whatever you folks would like to deal with.
I'll make a motion to continue until February 21st, 2024.
Eric, second.
Good.
I second. With the caveat that I regret that I won't be able to attend that meeting.
Okay. So that was a motion by Gusty and a second by Eric. Roll call, please.
Eric, aye.
Then I.
Gusty, aye.
Brian, aye.
Terry, aye.
And Earl. Okay, we'll see you next time around.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, next we're on to discussion and direction items. The Minturn water treatment plant. We've got a lot of our experts zooming in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through a long woven journey we're here this evening. We have started this process back in 2019. I would say we started the process even before that. You know, Willie Powell came to us through the Town Eagle back in 2015, 2016. He saw pretty much right away after having run the Town of Eagles water utility for 29 years that Minturn's water utility was in need of some review. So he pretty quickly knew that he needed to bring on board a water engineering firm to start taking a look at things. And to drastically summarize all of this, by 2018, we had a water engineering firm on board. By 2018, 2019, we had a water capital improvements plan. That plan identified an extensive backlog of water improvements that were needed for the utility. Everything from a new water tank to new water treatments to new meters, leak detection systems. The list was very long and the costs were pretty extensive. At that point, you know, that council at that time really took matters into their own hands. They said, you know, we're going to start leading Minturn forward and taking the water utility in a new direction, getting things fixed in a very proactive manner. So with that, they chose to really start working on eliminating the backlog, to start getting away from a break fix model from the water infrastructure. Took a very forward thinking approach. They wanted to leave the water utility in a better place than where they had inherited it. And they knew it was time for the town to responsibly address the long-term issues and started making the tough decisions that were required to run a responsible utility. And at that same point in time, they also, for the very first time in the town's history, created the first ever town's strategic plan. And it is that town strategic plan that the staff and consultants used to base our recommendation for this evening's discussion for the recommendation of a membrane plant moving forward. We're here this evening because after a very long process of reviewing options for how best to treat Minturn's water moving forward, given ongoing and increasing regulations from the state of Colorado, we're faced with what to do with an aging infrastructure system and how best to address those issues. We have searched, I would say, under every nook and cranny, how to address those issues while keeping costs as low as possible to the water rate users. We have been doing that since 2019. So we first came to the council with the capital improvements plan in 2019 with the recommendation by then water engineering firm SGM, who recommended a membrane plant and a secondary water source on the Eagle River, known as the Eagle River well field. The council directed staff to review that Eagle River well field, which after a year of study was deemed not appropriate for long-term use due to environmental hazards based on groundwater plumes. Thank you, Gusty. We had plumes that after, you know, a 20 to 30 year time span of pumping toward the Eagle River could cause a further contamination. So the council, being in very environmentally minded, did not want to risk, you know, further degrading the Eagle River and chose not to go that route. The council then went a different direction and sought a water right at the confluence of the Eagle River and Cross Creek surface water right for 4 CFS as part of these IGA with ERWSD and UERWA for the Bolts Lake IGA. So once costs came back for that confluence right, combined with a water treatment plant that were estimated around $25 million, that was a really high number and a tough pill to swallow. for our tiny community. So the council sent staff back to the drawing board for what was called the water treatment plant alternatives analysis, to see if we could find any way to see if there were other options available to bring costs down. That analysis, and Jared Limke is with us tonight with HDR, reviewed a water treatment plant membrane option, a package plant option, as well as the rehabilitation of the slow sand filters. That came back after review with the water committee that included Lynn Feiger and Gusty Kanakis to still recommend the membrane plant, but in a phased approach to not include initially the secondary water source, so that we could hopefully get more funds over time and not have that huge upfront cost all at once. So we, the concept there was, okay, let's get a membrane plant in, not have the costs of a secondary water source on top of all of that. Down the road, hopefully we'll leave that option open for future generations who can then bring that option on board at some point in time. Simultaneously to that concept, brought forward was the option of enlarging the well field on Cross Creek. And council, in the continued efforts to keep costs as low as possible, asked staff and consultants to review that option. So Bill Berg with Martin and Wood, who is also on the call tonight. In fact, just know that everybody's on the call tonight. Bill Berg, who's on the call tonight, brought his team in, brought outside drilling experts, Cascade from state of Arizona, brought them in, and they studied our wells 3 and 4 to better understand if we could enlarge those wells to better service the town without having to bring in a membrane plant. That memorandum with those results are in the packet, and it was found that actually well 4 is now actually compromised. It's lucky that we found this out, and it will need to be repaired to actually quite a large extent. And well 3 does not produce as much as we would have hoped. So that was not as hopeful. The results were not as positive as we would have liked. There are opportunities to still drill further wells in that area, but complications due to water rights restrictions make this a less viable option than may have been initially anticipated. So with that, we continue to discuss water treatment. We've discussed all of these options, and with the conclusion of the wells option, the next rational step for staff is to come back to all of you and say, what do you want to do next? So that's why we're here tonight. We understand that we may not have a conclusion tonight, and that's okay too. But we do want, from staff to keep bringing back to council, looking for direction from council as far as next steps. This evening with us, we have Jim Mann, who is Minturn's water finance expert. And he can talk about water rates, and he can also talk about financial aid programs that are available for helping folks when we have, if we get to the point where we have to raise water rates. Jim has worked with multiple municipalities who have had to raise water rates due to water infrastructure needs, and has implemented water rate programs and financing to help those with a financial need. So Jim Mann can talk about those opportunities. We have Christy Radabaugh with Martin and Wood, who can talk about water rights and how those impact our ability to do things on either Cross Creek or the Eagle River, and how that may impact certain operational abilities that we have pending consumptive use limitations and the such. We have Susan Ryan here with us tonight. She's Minturn's water attorney and can talk to legal matters. We have Jared Limke with HDR and can talk about all things water engineering. We have John Volk, our mighty operations manager, who keeps things going on a day-to-day basis. And we also have Bill Berg, who is the one who's handled all of the wells investigations. So I didn't put a big presentation together tonight. We've been doing this for years, but I do have quite a few memos in the packets. I have a bevy of experts with us, And I wanted to have everybody available for council to have a robust discussion along with Q&A and for folks from the public that might have questions that they'd like to have answered. So with that, I'll turn it over to the council.
Thank you, Michelle.
Oh, I'm so sorry. And I have Jeff Spinell in person, our fearless civil engineer.
How could you forget the guy that actually shows up in person?
I know. So sorry, Jeff.
So, I would like to see if there's any of our attendees here. Jared, I see you there. Does anybody want to do an initial presentation, any or all, or do you just want to do a Q&A session? Jared, would you start with answering that your end of it?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. I don't necessarily have a presentation prepared. I wanted to come and answer questions. But everything Michelle said, I agree with.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, well, let's open it up for discussion then. Does anyone have any particular questions that come to mind at this moment? Brian?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, you want to start with that? Eric, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm gonna say mine till later, so.
Lynn?
Am I correct? And I'm still trying to understand all this stuff, so excuse my ignorance.
Could you get closer to the microphone?
I'm
Could
sorry.
you pull your microphone
Oh, I'm
closer?
sorry.
I'm hearing it.
Yes. So, as I understand it, rightly or wrongly, if we want some kind of redundancy in our system, it's important not only to build the membrane plant, which hopefully eventually could be added on to and make use of Eagle River surface water, but also to fix our wells so that we have alternative water source during spring runoff. When we have all this turbidity in the river, and apparently, as I understand it, this isn't addressed by the membrane treatment facility, wouldn't be addressed by that. It is still an issue. So what we really need to do, and I'm also thinking that it makes sense to rehab the water tank in Malloy Park, because that gives us a second water tank that's really usable and some redundancy there as well. So what I'm thinking is the true minimal costs to go forward that we should consider is the cost of rehabbing at least rehabbing our wells, even if we don't move them. Rehabbing the tank, the tank in Malloy Park, fixing the sand filter to the extent that we can, and then making the first installment on what's going to be a long range, very, very expensive water plan. And the first step in that direction would be the water membrane plant, without the ability to handle additional growth, without adding another skid. Am I right? Is what I'm saying makes sense? Any of
Yes.
you? Huh?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
It is.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
we're
agree.
looking at for an overall plan.
Right. The only thing that I would, that wasn't super, I know the Malloy Park tank. But to correct me if I'm wrong, but that only serves Malloy Park, but no one else in.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's the old Minturn tank, not the Malloy
Okay.
tank. I
Gotcha.
had the wrong tank.
No worries. Yep. So thanks for clearing that up. I'm on board now. But yeah, I agree. Adding as many different sources of clean in air quotes, water to your system is the best measure you can do to protect public health. So rehabbing the wells, good idea. Rehabbing the water plant, good idea. Rehabbing the storage tanks, great idea.
I do want to make a clarification that well number 3 it's fine. It's just limited in what it produces. So we don't do anything to well 3. And well 4 has essentially a big dent in the screen. It still works and operates, but you can't do any cleaning maintenance on it. So eventually it will need to be replaced, but it's functioning fine right now. I just want to make that clarification.
Thank you, Bill. Yes.
Well, thanks for everybody joining us. I guess I have a question for Jared. I know when we interviewed all the engineer firms, we chose you because we got the best answer for looking for money. And I know when you first gave us our financial report, it showed that there really wasn't any money available to get assistance, which we've actually gotten $2 million towards the plant. One was for the water tank. So we had a total of 3. But with us supposedly not a disadvantaged community, is there any other sources out there we could tap as far as like infrastructure money that Biden just passed, I think, a year ago? Is there any options for us to get some federal money or some state money to offset this expense?
I don't know the answer to that question from a yes or no standpoint. In order to answer that, I can't answer it right now. I apologize. I could check back in with Paul. He's the one who did our funding report, and see if there's any new sources. But from what I do understand is that grant application or grants for this type of work are prioritized and basically all funneled towards disadvantaged communities, which you identified that Minturn is not in that case. And so that was the reason why no grant funding was available, but assistance as far as financing, which I know is another air quote assistance type of thing. That certainly is and was available. I think we'll have to check back in with the state revolving fund to see what their capacity is to provide financing for a project like this. But financing is a much more likely option for a large capital project than is grant funding from some of the sources that we looked into.
Seeing the financing option just seems like isn't as attractive now with interest rates been going up. It just is kind of, increased how much we're going to raise the rate on each ratepayer. So I don't know. I'm going to state my feeling on this, just how I kind of would like to see it go. I'm in support of a membrane plant, but I'm not in support of putting the debt onto the ratepayers. I don't think that's fair. We do have a slow sand filter that's in need of some repair. I think first thing we should look at is whether it's sinking 2 new wells to replace 3 and 4, so we could get to the 80 GPM that we actually have senior rights on, and maybe even get a little more if we go to like 120, because we do have 225 of junior rights on that. But maybe we could get some water off that and then repair our slow sand filters, maybe get one of them that needs enclosed. I know they have to get up to CDPHE standards, and they were red tagged because it was not in an enclosure. But maybe we get at least one of the filters up and going, and the one that's being run now, number 3, do some maintenance on it to keep it going. And then rehab the water tank that's next on the agenda, so we have some additional storage. I feel that would get us going for a few years until we actually could sell our Highlands parcel that we've made an agreement with. And then that money could be used down the road to purchase or build a new membrane plant. That way it could accommodate Eagle River water. I know right now the slow sand filter won't accommodate Eagle River water because of the high mineral content. But if we're not going to be pulling any water off of the surface rights and running it through the plant, this would do it. I mean, because we're fortunate. Cross Creek water is pretty pure, and it doesn't take a whole lot to treat it compared to Eagle River water. That's kind of my feeling on it, and I'll stay at that.
Thank you, Gusty. Right?
I'm gonna say again that wells 3 and 4. They are clean, they're operating fine. And they're supplying each 100 GPM right now. Well 4 will eventually need to be replaced because of the compromise in the screen, but for at least the next couple of years, it's gonna be just fine.
Could I ask a quick question? You said 100 GPM, yeah, that's how they test it out, but our water right, if I'm not mistaken, is 80 GPM. Is that correct?
Senior rights, we have
Senior
225
rights.
on junior.
Yeah, but if they test at 100 GPM, they can certainly produce 80. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Brian, do you have any questions right now?
Those pumps right now are set to
We
operate.
got a lot. I'm trying to figure out exactly where to start. I think.
Christie, did you have something to say? We didn't hear you.
The pumps on the wells are set to operate at 80 GPM or less. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Can't hear me. Okay, let me.
Yell.
Very quiet.
She said 80
The
GPM.
pumps on both of them are limited at 80
There's
GPM.
that too.
Yep. Okay.
I believe what Christie said is the pumps are set to operate at 80 GPM.
Oh, okay. So, okay, so it's a small point anyway, so go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to, arrive at a similar conclusion is that. I guess there's a couple of things that I'm not understanding completely, and one would be. If you had to designate like a level of urgency. In replace, so there's different things, right? There's like a water quality issue, so we've got. Our current plant operations may not in the future, CDPHE doesn't like slow sand filters, it has turbidity issues in the spring. Like what level of urgency are we on like water quality and actual plant investment and replacement? Like are we needing to do like this said 3 to 5 years and that was done in 2018, so I think we're there. Is this something that needs to be done tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years from now? The same for kind of quantity when we were coming up with these growth numbers and what we're kind of obligated to in terms of caps in the future. Did we look at, water regulations, restrictions, tiered rates, impacts of mandatory and voluntary use restrictions during summer and things like that? So they're not trying to build, a church for Easter Sunday here with our system. And we're looking at really like trying to stay within a water budget for the town for a few months. And does that buy us some time or buy us a limited, a less investment need in order to hit some big 450 gallon per minute number across the well field? So I guess I'm just trying to understand like the urgency of this all, and what your recommendation would be. If we do decide to try to push this down the road a little bit and save, make sure that the current system is operating, maybe tackle one of the slow sand filters. Is that a viable option, or is this whole thing about to fall over on us right now and we need to take action like now?
Yeah, so I can provide an answer, and then since John Volk is on, I'm going to ask him to follow on me. But since I'm springing it on him, I'll go first. Rehabilitating the slow sand filters, either filter 1 or filter 2. So there's 3 total filters at the plant right now. 1 and 2 are outdoors, and they have not been demonstrated to be completely lined. There needs to be a liner to separate the water from the earth, basically, in those filters, and that doesn't exist, which is the reason those filters got shut down. So it's a significant project to bring filters 1 and 2 up to the current regs. If it was simple, that would be one thing. But it's just not simple to bring those up to current regs to get it online and filtering and producing water. So that's kind of my way to address filters 1 and 2 rehabilitation. Now filter 3, that is indoor and inside of a concrete basin, which is why it is compliant and still in use today. And then the other thing, as far as urgency, I think I would just kind of default to John Volk. He has the most intimate experience with the water plant, day-to-day operations, monthly operating report. He sees the water quality data coming in and out of that plant. And then, so John, if you're able to, are you able to provide an opinion on level of urgency?
Yeah, I don't think we're at a cliff where we're about to go off right now. It's all going to come down to how much the town grows right now. We've done a lot of work with leak detection and using the combo of the wells when they're, especially when they're in junior priority early during spring runoff, when they typically are, we can get away with any kind of turbidity issues. But it's going to come down to how much more water the town's going to need is what's going to push you to that. We need to do something now point.
Hey, Jared, if I might just make sure for total clarity, I felt like it kind of just tiptoed around the answer. And I think everyone here knows that's not my style. So regarding rehabilitation of the slow sand filters, what I heard Jared say is it's not cheap and it's not easy and it's not a good investment in our funds for the future. Jared, did I get that wrong?
Concur.
Okay.
You know what, though?
I'm so sorry.
One at a time.
Like, I just want to make sure that I'm clear.
I'll wait my turn, but then I'll voice my opinion.
It's a multi-million-dollar project for an interim fix. That's all I want to say.
If you only did one of them, and right now it was 5.8 to 8.9. If you did one of them, and it's 2.5, still a whole lot cheaper than paying anywhere between 9.8 and 14.9. And you still have to do everything that you need to do for the when you take on Eagle River water, which is pre-treatment, adding more towers. So, I mean, just doing the membrane plant right now isn't going to bring us into the future, because you still have to do upgrades to the membrane plant for the future.
Okay.
Which
so
means
we're
Eagle River.
gonna be orderly here, okay? So, Brian, do you have any more questions?
Give me a second, I've got.
Well, we're gonna be,
Got a lot of them, so
we're gonna be
I'm sure
going.
we'll make back around, yeah.
So if you don't have
Yeah.
one right away, we can get later back around to you.
Can I jump in on a quick one?
Eric has a question.
Pretty much. Eric, okay, catch up.
For the, just kind of more for public knowledge, we get a clarification on the current age of the slow sand filters as well as what their average lifetime expectancy is.
Jared or John, can you help with that?
Yeah, your number 3 filter, the indoor one, was installed in, I believe it was 1993. And we've done some minor things like adding sand to it. But eventually that's going to be a complete tear down and rebuilding of the entire structure besides the concrete. The outside filters, that's a complete rebuild. You're basically building new filters like number 3. And they were done, I think the originals were in the 60s and maybe they were rebuilt in the 80s.
Okay. Brian, if you don't have one right off the bat, we'll go to Terry. Okay, Terry, go ahead.
No, I'm still trying to organize my questions, because I got a couple of answers.
John, I have questions for you. Kind of gonna push you a little bit on the answer to Brian's question. My recollection, so I've been with this council since 2016 and I'm part of this, so if it may feel sudden to other people, this has been a very long, detailed process, and a very public one. So I think a lot of you guys were here with us throughout all of it. The room was more packed, but John, the slow sand filters, are we at any risk when we rebuild those of them not coming back? Because I remember the conversation being at some point a worry that you can't recreate the biology, or the biology just doesn't come back. So when we talk about recreating the slow sand filter, or rebuilding it, or we at any risk that we don't get them back?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a potential risk. Your water temperature, even in the summer, is, 50s, high 50s, right? And bacteria that we're trying to grow, it really starts going dormant around 54 degrees. So, I mean, the real reason you're looking, the way you operate in the wintertime with those filters is just your water is so good, the incoming water. It's kind of amazing they work. I mean, that's normally a warmer climate is where you're going to see slow sand filters and, warm countries that are more humid and warm. That's definitely a possibility that you're just not going to get that biomass back in your sand.
And then you just said, to Brian's question, I just kind of wanted more clarification on that. Because he was, and maybe also to Eric's question about the life. I mean, your question was pretty much about the life of the slow sand filter, or are we on the edge of a cliff, like you said, John? But I want to push a little bit more on, I want to know where you think we stand with, I mean, I've read all the reports, so I see what it's going to take to invest in our slow sand filter. And I think that report came out last summer, maybe we had it. The life of the slow sand filters as is. I mean, doing nothing right now as opposed to investing in the slow sand filters. I don't know. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, filters 1 and 2 are past their life. They're no longer in compliance. Well, they never were in compliance, really. Number 3, we honestly try to use that as little as possible. We set that thing to about 65 gallons a minute. Its max rating is 360 per the state. We tried running it at 180 and it plugged up in like a month. I mean, it's probably going to be less than 5 years and we're going to be pulling sand out and putting new sand in, is what I see. It's got to be at least 6 years now since we put sand in that. So we're probably getting due to have another refill. But as far as the life of that filter, I mean, I would figure in the next 5 years, 10 years, you're going to want to do a full tear down and rebuild.
If we're running the town up, I mean, basically we're running the town with 2 wells. And that take the 80 GPM on each covers the existing town as is right now. And slow sand filter 3 is barely running. What happens if that well 4 is compromised? I mean, I'm looking at the questions of redundancy for the next 5 years, foreseeable 5 years. Are we putting ourselves at risk doing nothing on the system?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, if you've got something that comes down and even contaminates, I mean, I don't know what would come down. Maybe there's a fire that gets into our slow sand filter, mudslides, that could be down. We already know that well 4 has an integrity issue with the screen. And yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility.
And then maybe this question is for Jared. Who else? Or Bill. I don't know. Probably you all know the answers, but when we first did this, and I want everybody to hear this, in 2019, to construct a new membrane filter plant was 3.8 million. And this past fall, we found out it's going to be 9.8 million. In 5 years, how much is that membrane treatment plant going to be? 18 million? I mean, I'm just trying to gander a guess. On top of, having to complete loops with our water mains, replace our water mains. I mean, waiting. You know, I'm just concerned because this council has never truly addressed our water system like it should be and treated it like a water enterprise. We've treated it as an addendum to our, town operations, and it's a water enterprise. I mean, what's our risk? I mean, it's not gonna go down, is it? I mean, you guys would know.
No, you're certainly right. Costs are only gonna get more and more. So what the actual number is, I don't even know. I don't want to try to guess. But it'll certainly be more than what it is today.
And then Christy, last question. Sorry, and then. When we did the water CIP, we definitely had a lot of people in here. And I hope that you guys go tell everybody to come in on these conversations because it really involves public input, which I think has been kind of missing from this table right here, but when we did this CIP, it was a very, very public process. And so what I think, or what any one of us think, we need public input as well as the input from the experts. But when we talked about growth, we talked about, I thought the number is right in front of me, but I think 190 was the number that is infill. So it's 70 taps, which a bunch went to Minturn North in their approvals, and there's some floating, and then 120 for the school district. When I first came on council, Dow Junction was a really big deal to get some kind of commercial tax base rate. Also, if we supply Dow Junction with water, that would be just shoring up the fact that we would reap any benefits, that it would remain a Minturn. Was that included in the growth scenarios? I know we were all kind of questioning, but do you have that information? Because when I look at the water CIP, it just says growth. And I remember that it's growth without Battle Mountain. So that does not include Battle Mountain, but it was growth. So I assume Dow Junction was in that. I'm just curious.
Let me pull up my notes on that. Jared, remind me how many SFE of growth you're planning for in the design numbers?
450, including that includes school district. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So 120 for the school district, and then the remaining 330. You're asking what's the breakout on those, Terry?
Yeah. So in the water CIP, it talks about the infill, including the school district. So then there was 450 minus 190, 120 plus 70. So what is that remainder? I mean, because for all of us that visualize our town, I'm terrible at math. What is that difference? 450 minus 190 is 260. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. My daughters would be so impressed. Okay, so what is that 260? Like, what I want to address that growth too. What is the 260? What is that? It's
260.
Yeah, 260.
Okay, I always said 50.
No.
And like right off.
Terry, I have some old notes from that process that indicate the school district at 120 SFE, which is what you've been saying. And then infill in town, Union Pacific commercial and residential at up to 300 SFE. And then specifically called out in addition to that is 100 block growth at 30 SFE.
Interesting. So we talked about the railroad land as a possible infill growth.
It's conceptual.
Yeah, I think it's, in a way, those were placeholders. If 200 SFE end up in Dowd Junction, then there's still 130 SFE for in town and 120 for the school district, and that what would be 200 at Dowd.
Okay, thank you. It's helpful to know all of those pieces when we're addressing this, like if we think about growth and it's this big scary number, what does that actually look like for it?
Well, and on top of that, like every SFB isn't created equal, but it seems it would be crazy of us to approve a bunch of 3,000, square foot maximum size houses with the maximum amount of irrigation possible given our current water scenario. Like we should be adjusting our code and ordinances in order to absolutely discourage irrigation, big water use development. Like we should be looking at approving multifamily development that doesn't have irrigation and could have, 4 SFEs in some building that pays tap fees for all of those, but then the use associated with that is not nearly the same as some new house with a ton of irrigation. So that also seems like we should take that into account when we're looking at like growth estimates planning.
Let's be sure to take our turns.
Oh, he still had questions, so.
No, that's okay.
Did you have any?
No, that was it. Sorry, thank you. I hope I was.
So, council is uncertain about what's the best path to take. And it's kind of a passionate break in that, and but that's good. It's good to have a full discussion with clashing ideas and so forth. So, and the main uncertainty is we all recognize that the membrane plant needs to happen. But when do we do it? There's concern. We have a time gap problem. We do have future revenues that will come in, although you can't never guarantee that, but they're pretty solid. But the gap between now and then would require an increase in water rates. And this had been discussed in great detail in our discussions back in 2018 and 19. And I made a point at that time to make sure everybody understood. This was back when the interconnect was being envisioned by Battle Mountain, which turned out it was just a no-go for the council and the public. But I was making sure that they understood that if you didn't want the interconnect to happen, that we would have to take our destiny within our own selves and quit relying on other people, other entities out there to pay our bills. So, and I told them every time that we could have probably some of the highest water rates in Colorado if the interconnect doesn't happen. And it turned out we couldn't approve it anyway because there's too much going on with the district at that time that was making it untenable. But so here we are. There's no there's no other options for water treatment in this town but us. So then it's just a matter of, do you take the risk of delaying the investment into the infrastructure that we badly need, or do we go ahead and have high water rates for a while until the money that flows in the future will take care of it? And that's where we're having a problem with each other. And so Jared, you had mentioned when you opened our discussion at the meeting a few months ago, you had some thoughtful comments, and I wonder if you could give us your view as far as, you know, when I hear risk about our water, to me, that's untenable, because these people here are responsible for supplying potable water, quality water, as far as we're concerned, to our public. When we say risk, I'm saying, okay, there may, if we delay and I hear risk, I'm saying, what happens if a well goes down, or we have a problem with the filter 3, those kinds of things. And one thing to understand as well is sand filters aren't used anymore in Colorado because CDPHE, Colorado Department of Health and Environment, gets directives from EPA as far as water quality. And those regs come down fairly regularly through the years. And it's just a matter of time before a sand filter system cannot meet the regs. It could be, I'm hearing that copper and another mineral they was talking about tightening up those regs. Maybe John or Jared might have an idea of it, or anybody that's on this Zoom call. We hear these things, but what is the likelihood? And I know CDPHE is not going to say anything until they announce that the regs are coming down. Has anyone heard anything about that? Any future regs?
I haven't heard anything about that, but more and more the criteria for upgrading and maintaining public water systems is defaulting to using best available technologies, and slow sand filters do not fit into that category. So that would be the conventional treatment process, which was in our alternatives analysis, that would fall under that packaged conventional plant, and then also membranes. Both of those are considered best available technologies for the surface water treatment. So slow sand filters are not. So that's but yeah, again, I don't know of any regulations coming down that say no more slow sand filters throughout the entire country. The ones that are in place need to immediately start plans for remove and replacement. I don't know the status of that, if there is a status.
So right now I'm understanding from what we've heard tonight that filter 3 is producing a maximum of 60 gallons per minute. And the 2 wells are producing 160 gallons per minute total. Which gives us a total of 220 gallons per minute. What and I'm not sure whether it's John or Jerry, but what, or actually maybe even Christie, but what are we secure, assuming that there's no problems with these for 5 or 10 years? How, and we just don't grow until we get our plan in. Is that enough gallons per minute to take care of even current populations? We've already approved one development, so that will be probably another few hundred people in town, which is, a few hundred people is a pretty big growth thing. Is this enough with the 120 and the 54 and then turn north and another 16 per building? If that happens, is that are we going to be secure with that?
So I can answer first, and then I think John should, based on his day-to-day interaction with the facility. So that total combined 220 gallons a minute. The equivalent flow rate that we can take a look at is 0.3 million gallons per day, roughly, approximate. In the water CIP from 2019, that does cover an average daily demand, which was identified as 0.26 MGD. And so you do have storage in the system. So on your average day, I believe that all of those systems running at that full tilt flow rate would cover you. John, do you have anything else?
What was the additional infill? How many more units?
190. Without adding any more growth.
Okay.
No, 190.
I mean, there's gonna be times that it's gonna be tight just with, well 4. We don't have a lot of water rates on that. And then we also have to have, at least a month of downtime on filter 3 just to clean it when it's dirty. So, I mean, there could be times in the summer where it could get a little tight.
So you would anticipate possibly, basically no outdoor watering, at times, through this time period?
Yeah, potentially if we're having, mechanical breakdowns at the plant or anything, you might have to send out notices.
Would having 2 tanks help that problem, John? Because we've been talking, it's on our agenda after this about rehabbing the original water tank.
Yeah, I mean, it can buffer you for a short time. I mean, you don't want to rely on, having your tanks get down so low you don't have fire flow even because you can't make enough water.
So, Christy, it's my understanding that under our current scenario, we have enough water to handle our current use, the 120 users from the school district and the 70 SFEs that are divided between Battle North and Belden, and that's all factored into your calculations, and you include a 10% cushion is to be safe. Is that correct?
That sounds right to me, Lynn, but I think it's important to note that the town used to use the ditch more than it is now because of the status of your filters at the water treatment plant. And that is moving the water use to be more heavily reliant on the wells. And the wells have smaller limits on them. And so there is, given the infrastructure and treatment changes that the town has experienced, you're entering a phase where it's more likely that augmentation water will be due to Cross Creek. And right now, Minturn doesn't have an augmentation supply on Cross Creek.
So I understand the desirability of a membrane treatment plant. My great concern is the cost. The Minturn water isn't going to be one of the most expensive in the state. It already is one of the most expensive in the states. I think it's 7th in expense among all towns in Colorado, from what I saw already, without any additional expense. And if we add and go over to the water membrane plant, and nobody's saying that we shouldn't eventually do this, but if we do this and spend under these, if we could keep the cost at $4.5 million, which I doubt, it still doesn't give us any of the things that we really need. It doesn't. The major problem with the sand filtration system, and I do understand that there are a number of small towns in Colorado that still do use sand filter systems, even though it isn't the best available technology.
Two.
Okay, two.
Two.
I don't know the number, but and there's no question, but eventually we need to move there. But the main problem with, as I understand it, with the quality of the water from the existing sand filter systems, particularly if we added we could add the a liner and a building to at least get one more of the filters into operation and I would love to know what that cost actually is. We've heard that it's not simple. We've heard that it's multi-million. I would like to know what a more accurate number of what that cost actually would be, because that might be a good stopgap measure to get us through this period. But the membrane plant that we're talking about doing now doesn't work for turbidity. It doesn't have technology to handle that because that's a whole nother level of expense. Also, the system that we're talking about now doesn't add redundancy because it doesn't allow us to use the surface water rights on Eagle River. And it certainly doesn't provide for any piping or distribution system to get the water from the Eagle River into our treatment plant. So, I mean, in the end, we're going to have to do, particularly if we want to do significant growth, growth above that 700 number that you've been using all along, we're going to have to go with a much more expensive, much more elaborate system that could easily cost, I think, $30 million. And I know that we're likely to get increasing revenues in the future, but I don't think the settlement hasn't been that isn't final yet with Battle Mountain, and we're already talking about spending the money that we're going to get from selling the Highlands. I don't think we can count on any of that at this point in time. So to me, I'm very much with Gusty. I think Gusty has the right idea here.
Okay, I'd like to introduce a point of order, please. We're not going through proper procedure in this discussion. We keep getting interrupted. I was halfway through my turn when you interrupted me. So what we need to do is continue to do the normal procedure where we go around the horn. Okay, so you're dominating the conversation right now. I would like some decorum here. Wait your turn, and then you have fun. Okay.
I think things should reflect that the mayor doesn't like what I'm saying, and he's treating me a different way than other members of the council. I waited until he was done, and I waited until it was my turn to ask questions.
Okay.
And the first time around, I only asked one question. You know, there are differences of opinion here, and I think we need to respect them.
Indeed.
Len, let me just. Eric hasn't even talked yet. You did interrupt, and you are allowed to state your opinion. But Brian asked one question. Eric hasn't asked anything. Let other people talk. You will always have your opportunity. And nobody doesn't want to hear what you have to say. Just please go around the horn. It's a better way to do it.
I agree. There's a way to go around it. I didn't think that Eric asked one question. I don't think he had another question. I don't think I interrupted Eric.
Okay.
And I think we should move on.
I agree. We need to move on, and we're going to go by our normal procedure. Everybody's going to have, ask all the questions they want to have to make all the statements they want to make. But let's not have one or two people trying to interrupt things. And so I've been waiting patiently for quite some time. No, don't say anything. I've been waiting for quite some time to make mine. I was interrupted. So I just want to make sure that from here, this point on, we're going to go in an order like we normally do. Okay, so I've been trying to come up with, and I, you know, it's council's job to not look at the now, but to look at the future. The now is a very big concern. I mean, we certainly want to make our normal rational decisions that are data-based. This council has approved the strategic plan, which outlines what our responsibilities are, and it gives guidance to staff on how they make their decisions and doing the direction that council gives them. It gives guidance to our council to understand that we have adopted principles. These principles we've all agreed to, and we will act accordingly to those principles. And then it also hopefully gives very big confidence to the citizens if the strategic plan is a 7-page document. And it's easy to read, but it tells exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And one of those main ones is that part of that plan is council will make decisions that will look to the future and guarantee a future prosperous town. And so that's very important for this council to understand that, yes, we will have to raise rates. Everybody in town should know that because we have been saying it for years. And when we did this, when we were going to do this water plant, it was going to cost money. We have Jim Mann here, I was about to call on next, who will be able to give us an overview of his numbers that he has given us. He is he's the one that does the modeling for our water rates. And so, Jim, we've heard a lot about the cost, and we know it's not pleasant for everybody. I mean, I'm a middle class guy. I don't want to pay that extra money either. But that said, could you go through your numbers really quick, an overview of your numbers?
Sure. Thanks and good evening. So we took a look at the HDR report and particularly focused in on the membrane plants. And if you recall, there was a range of costs within the membrane plant of between 9.8 million and 14.9 million, with a midpoint that we, just mathematically came up with at 12,350,000. So we did some modeling of your current utility and what the rates would need to be adjusted to in order to basically operate the new plant and then pay off the debt service if you went out and borrowed. And we did take into consideration that you've got the congressionally directed spending. We did not necessarily project the growth immediately because I know the Minturn North has been approved, and shortly, hopefully, they're coming in and paying their tap fees, et cetera. But beyond that, we really didn't add any growth at this point, but it's something that we would consider going forward. The other piece that, in the HDR report that it didn't necessarily include was the fact that you've got design and engineering fees that go along with the construction of a new plant. And it was our understanding that they were not included in that $9.8 million to $14.9 million cost figure. The estimate, and the engineers can correct me if I'm incorrect or I'm stating something incorrectly. The estimate for the 14.9, the high end of the plant, is about $2 million. So we proportionately reduced that to the less cost plants going forward. So that kind of puts you in a position, when you boil that down, that you're going to end up needing to borrow somewhere between about $8.3 million and $14,260,000, taking into consideration that congressionally directed spending. We did not include taking off anything for tap fees or system improvement fees from that borrowing. That could have a rather significant impact. I think our rough estimate is about $1.8 million that if, depending on when that money came in, you could further reduce the borrowing. But not taking that into consideration, because we just don't know when those revenues come in, you're looking at a new debt service, annual debt service number somewhere between 450,000 on the low end to about 775,000 on the high end. When you wrap that into your existing borrowing load in terms of what you currently have outstanding, the annual high cost estimate that you're going to have to generate on the debt service fee is about $980,000 just to make the payment. And, I always go back, and this is where, the finance guys, get themselves in trouble because finance people do things differently. But just remember that when you borrow money on a revenue bond basis, after you've operated the utility, we have to show that we have a minimum, and this is the Colorado Water Resource Power Development Authority minimums. You have to show that you have $1.10 available to make your debt service payment. That's the absolute minimum that you have to have out there. When I do the modeling, I usually give you a little bit more cushion than that, and I modeled this to hit a target of 1.2 times what you need to actually make your debt service payment. So that boils it into that we need to create a debt service fee that generates $1,175,000 in round numbers on an annual basis to make all your debt payments. And that would be over a 30-year period. And that would, based upon your current 756.5 SFEs, you would need to increase your debt fee on the low end about $70 a month to the high end about $112 a month, which would bring that monthly debt fee to about $87 to $130, which that's the increase you're looking at. The good news is that you've, over the last couple of years, raised your operational rates and your volumetric rates to a point where those don't necessarily need to be adjusted anything significantly to the rate. So you're really just looking at the debt service fee that you have to adjust. And, the maximum we're seeing right now, or the estimate, is about $130. That doesn't include, adding the 54 for Minturn North or the 120 for the school district property or any of the other infill, which would allow you, as those additional SFEs come on, to drop that monthly charge on the debt service fee. Once those those actual SFEs are constructed, you'll be able to bring that impact down. But if we were borrowing this money today, basically, and we just had the 756 SFEs, those are the numbers that you'd be looking at.
That's very helpful, Jim. Thank you. So to summarize, whatever we're currently paying on our water rates, there would be an additional roughly $130 to service the debt added to that once we begin the program.
It's actually only about $112 because your current debt fee is $17.46 or something like that a month. And you'd be increasing it by about $112 to bring it to about that $130. Okay. So it's not the full $130 that you would be adding at the high end of the project cost.
Okay, Eric.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was on council in 2019 when we had the discussion on the CIP, and well, when we unanimously voted in favor of exploring the water treatment plant to do a membrane solution. So it is unfortunate that pricing has gone up so much, looking at these numbers today, as to where it was when I was previously on council. It obviously was, it was a shock then, but it was a no-brainer, I think, for us. That being said, it's only been a couple of years and prices have gone up significantly. I think in the best interest of the town, looking forward to future generations, I think we do need to take a serious look at, pursuing the right actions for us, which would include probably not waiting too much longer for implementing this system. I think that can get us into some significant trouble. Increased rates along with that. If we do kick that can down the road, we spend money unnecessarily. Where are we going to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now? So no questions specifically for the staff. I appreciate your guys' continued efforts on all of this. I mean, it's incredible to see how much has transpired since I was on council initially. But my fear is that we continue to sit on our hands and not do anything. I think we need to start working with or like getting additional public input and working with our experts to find a solution and soon. So that's my input on that.
Thank you, Eric. Lynn?
I don't have anything.
Kathy?
I'd like to comment on the SGM 2019 CIP, and maybe Jared could chime in on this one. I just feel that their 4.2 was low when they actually submitted that. I don't feel that those numbers was accurate. I don't think we've seen that big of an increase since then. I just feel that they missed the ball when they actually did their estimate. And then also, I know Lynn mentioned it too. I'd like to know what it would cost just to rehab one of the slow sand filters. I know we had a total to rehab everything was 6.8 to 8.9 million, but what the cost would be just to do one. Still kind of sold on the idea, I don't want to just leave everything alone. I'd like to have something that's working and something that's reliable and something that we're actually able to use. I just don't know about putting that type of debt service under our repairs. I guess that's what really worries me.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, I think we all see where it's heading, but I think just in terms of where we are, we have work to do. We've got 2 functioning wells, we've got 1 functioning plant, 1 functioning diversion point. And I think we've got some work to do as a community to look at the impacts of these rate raises and look at, our growth needs. The impact of tiered rates could have a lot. So people could see their base rate go up to debt service, but if they're really worried about their water use, they could cut their water down, to 1,000 gallons a month and see a very low usage rate decrease. And maybe that will help out people. I think we need to look strongly again at our code around growth and irrigation and some of those requirements. And we need to start acting like a community that is in a water crisis. We'll call it a water crisis. We need to start acting like that instead of just assuming that we can grow at past what we've done in the past. So thank you for all your work and input and answer to the questions. So that's kind of where I'm heading.
Back to you, John. I have more questions for you. When we did the water CIP in 2019, how many filters did we have running then?
It's a good question. I think we had 3 running in 2019. I'm trying to remember when I put that filter system in on the back end of number 2 as an emergency. I can't remember honestly what we had in 2019. I think there were 3 up there.
We had more than 1, right? I feel like we
I
had
know when I
3.
got on 2020, we were down, we just had 1 when I got on council.
Yeah, it was somewhere around 19 or 20 when we did the study for the state to see if there was a liner, see if the integrity was compromised. So yeah, it was sometime around then, 19, that we dropped down to 1.
I'm just curious, I'm trying to wrap my head around, the fact that we are, right now, we have an existing population, but we are required, we've extended our water system to 190 SFE additional service. So our water system has to provide the 190 extra. And I just want to make sure that we're basing the information we have today with the 60 on the slow sand filter. I want to make sure that somebody asked you, John, are we good with what we've got, and adding the 70 under the moratorium and the 120 at the school district? That's coming down the pipe. So I think that really we are incumbent on asking you. I mean, we have you guys here. Doesn't matter what I think. The facts are the facts. You guys are gonna chat. You guys are the experts. So can we service those 190? I mean, I think that's a really, really, really important question. Because those are coming down the pipe right now. Pretty soon, pretty quick here. That maybe Christy remembers, or, I mean, I just want to make sure that we're good right now.
Yeah, it's could be tight trying to stretch this plant. I mean, I've been talking about a new membrane plant here since probably 13 when Jim White was the manager, and we're using TSD and looking at a pilot study. And we just been band-aiding this plant. And, I'm looking at this letter. It looks like in 18 is when we took the filter offline. Oh, maybe. I mean, eventually we got to do something with this filter 3. We got to look into something. I don't think my recommendation would not be touch that slow sand filter and try to rehab one of the outdoor ones. I think you'd be further ahead spending money on a smaller plant that could be expandable in the future. That's how I would see it. I think it's a little bit of a gamble rehabbing slow sand. But that's kind of my opinion of that. But I mean, there's things in this plant too we're not looking at. I mean, it's also the clear well. I mean, you guys are going to have a new clear well. That thing is, I would call it past its prime right now. We're looking at construction regardless of building a new plant. We're going to be having to make some pretty significant investments in the treatment up there. So to say that we can serve, it's hard to say. It can be close, especially in the summer. And if we're having a real dry year and we're reaching water limits, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into your system on what you can and can't do, and how you can meet the new demand.
I'm just a ratepayer and a user, and I'm freaking out hearing that. I can't imagine how our manager's feeling. But I also want to, all right. So I guess I don't really it's not a finite answer. Maybe we can service that extra 190. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to nail you down.
So is this extra 190, is there zero outside irrigation, or what's going to be involved with that?
They've got so Minturn North got approved with a one size fits all irrigation system that will, we obviously the town is gonna have to put consumptive use limits on everybody coming up here down the pipe, whether it's tomorrow or in 5 years. But and then the school district has no outdoor use. So the 120 is no outdoor use. They can use the Arminda ditch for that, and then the Minter North is 40, no, how many SFEs?
I think they're currently 54, and they're actually going to be one of our most efficient outdoor water users in all of town.
But in simple terms, John, I think it's up to 70 SFE that would have outdoor water use. That's about 40% of the growth that we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's mechanical breakdowns, wells going out. I mean, there's so many things that could be going into factoring into how we can supply water to people. And we already, I mean, the system is not completely 100% stressed, but you know, we're putting out a lot of water sometimes, especially we have a leak and it's hard to find one. You got to consider that. It's just not, the plant's not robust right now and completely redundant.
Okay, well, I would just, I mean, I feel like this town has been ready for it. Burying our heads in the sand filter for far too long. I've been waiting to say that. I'm so sorry. I'm also concerned, okay, and maybe I'm the only one that has this concern, but hedging our bets on the ever-loving you know, guardian angel of Battle Mountain has not worked for us. And I'm extremely worried that people would think that a sale of a parcel might be the answer to our problems, or tap fees. We don't know that is a huge unknown. And if we haven't learned our lesson there, they should not come into this conversation. That is the whole purpose of this conversation, is that Minturn, we have to do what we have to take care of our own business. There's no fictional, you know, savior out there that's going to magically give us a bunch of money. This is what we've got. So I just, when I hear that, and both sides of this aisle have thrown that out there, don't do it. Like, it is not a viable, it might happen, but please don't do it. It's not, it shouldn't enter in this conversation. And in fact, in the water CIP, we decided that we would not enter them into this conversation. So if we want to enter them in this conversation, you know, we wouldn't have made that settlement, you know, that they would build their own water treatment plant. Things will change. But talking about them as far as any rate difference or anything along those lines is really a dangerous path to go down. So, well, I appreciate it. It's been a long process, but I feel like at some point we're gonna have to give direction to our staff, because we have been burying our heads in the sand filter for far too long. We have got to do something with our water, and we've got to make some decisions. We have chased down every avenue and every path, from wells to Eagle River well fields, and I think everybody needs to gear up on decision time. It's probably not going to be tonight. We'll wait for a full council, but it's got to happen.
So I did find out the integrity study I did was May of 2020. So it's probably July. We got a letter saying we can't use them of 2020.
That sounds right to me, John, because I think it was during COVID when we were talking every week on water production and wells, and, you know, just really going through the sources and what was the plan.
So I'm concerned that what we looked at for 190 with our existing system was based on a couple more filters.
Okay, just real quick, we've been hearing varying numbers on different things, so I just want to put it out there in the analysis. For a membrane plant, it was going to be. And Jim has applied the 3 million from the congressionally directed spending. So that's good. So that would be from anywhere from 8.8 million to 14 point, I believe you said 14.8, Jim, is that right?
For the borrowing,
Yeah, on the from the max
14,260.
Okay, I got you 14.2 and 8. Okay. So that's what the membrane plant is estimated cost.
This is if we do it in 2025.
And so, and that's, and then the sand filter rehab now, to be fair, Gusty's saying, well, we could cut it down to just rehabbing one filter. And so we don't know where that would land it, but the idea with what they estimated on was bringing the filters up to full tilt would be between 5.6 and 9.8 million for sand filters. Just want to get that out there. And the reason there's a range is because there's a lot of uncertainty, these days on cost factors. So the maximum and the minimum, hopefully it'd be minimum, but cannot count, huh?
Is that for 2 filters or?
Well, I believe John, excuse me, or Jared, whoever, the sand filter reconstruction, was that including rebuilding filters 1 and 2 and then reworking filters 3, replacing sand and plumbing and so forth?
That estimate was just rebuilding filters 1 and 2.
Just leaving 3 alone. Okay.
Correct.
And okay. Gotcha. And the clear well was not included in that?
That's correct.
Okay, so that would be an extra. Okay. That's all I want to say. Aaron?
I have a proposed course of action here, and it's just something to think about. And I want to know if you guys think it's makes sense. We have to rehab our wells. We need our wells, even if we have a water membrane system. We need them for redundancy. We need them in the spring. So we have to do this anyway. So we should figure out that cost. Then we should fix the second water tank. And these are cheaper things that we need to do no matter what, and have obvious big benefits for the town. And then and then for step number 3, we should look into what the cost of replacing filter 3, because that we have to do. We should look and see what replacing filter 3 actually costs. And if that costs way too much, and if we conclude that that's just not going to be adequate, maybe then we should think about building the smallest water membrane treatment plant that we can get away with, which is, I think is what you guys bid here with the smaller number, with the idea that we make it so it could be expandable eventually to do water turbidity, to treat Eagle River water. But we should obviously invite all the public in and make them understand what the costs of all these things are for their water bill, and move forward. But I think we can't skip the first 3 steps of this. And I think there are a lot of reasons why we might want to wait until after we find out whether the Battles Mountain settlement is final or not. And to really assess our financial situation and our financial strength, so that we don't do something that really gets the town in trouble and which the residents simply can't afford. Do any of you disagree with that?
In long term, I guess I'll go back to, I heard the word or the phrase that risk associated with the water treatment and supply system for a utility is not only a 4-letter word, it's a something to be wary of. And every utility on the country deals with risk. There's risk is obviously a scale, and risk is most often reduced by use of paying to get rid of it, right, through capital improvements, which is what you're evaluating right now. So would those near-term capital improvements reduce your short-term risk? They would, but they don't do much for establishing a long-term risk prevention program wherein you increase your robustness and resiliency of water supply and or treatment and supply, which is the ultimate objective of any public water system, right? Provide safe and potable drinking water to the ratepayers. On top of that, every ratepayer in the country pays for its utilities debt in one way or another, right? Utilities everywhere do these very, very expensive capital projects to ensure that they can meet not only regulatory requirements, but self-imposed water quality treatment goals and distribution service goals. So what Minturn is going through is certainly not unique. I think the unique part is the population. The population of Minturn, considering you still have the same requirements that a Denver Water would have, right? Not all of them, but most of them, as far as being a community water system. So I understand the stress level. It's good. It's natural. Early in my career, I did very small wastewater plants, and they had all the same problems a giant wastewater plant has, but a fraction of the budget to deal with it. And I was left losing my hair. And so that's why you see what you see today, because it's just super stressful to deal with these problems when budget is so constricted. So I get you there. I understand it. I see where you're coming from. But in order to take the best measures possible for mitigating long-term risk, my recommendation is, as written in the report, not considering the near-term improvements, which I agree that we should discuss those more in depth, but the long-term, I just maintain the recommendation that we had in our report, and I think everybody somewhat agrees. So Lynn, I hope that I didn't ramble too much, and I hope I answered or at least provided some insight into your question there.
Yes, thank you.
Jesse?
I guess this question would be for Jared. On your proposal, it's 0.6 MGD capacity. And then it's also showing our wells, can provide up to 80 GPM. Is 0.6 GPD right sized for this, or are we trying to build this a little bit for growth too? Because right now my numbers are adding up. We have 80 for each well, and we're running our plant at 60. That's 320 GPM, and I don't know how to convert the 0.6 MGD to GPM. Because they're only using like 320 now, and granted, we're right at the limit, is what John's saying. And we've been talking like 450. If that converts over to 450, that 0.6 million gallons a day, are we building this too big?
could we go a little smaller and then have the option of down the road adding on to it?
Cool. Yeah, great questions. I have some good answers for that. So to answer your question, just because it's a number I use every day, several times a day, there's 694 gallons per minute in an equivalent 1 million gallon per day. So that's the conversion factor. So when we say 0.6 MGD, if you multiply that by 694, we get 416 gallons per minute as an equivalent type, flow rate. So the 80 times 2 plus 60, I believe, added up to about 0.3. 80 plus 80 plus 60 times or 6. Sorry, I'm doing math on your.
No problem.
But I love this calculator. So yeah, that's 0.32 MGD is what the existing facilities can produce operating at full tilt with no issues. So your question is, are we building this too big? My answer would be no. The 0.6 is a great number to shoot for. If 0.3 is our production that is getting you by right now, not considering any of the growth or the infill, because we do need to provide some form of process redundancy. That comes from CDPHE. So they want to see process redundancy in a new facility. And so to answer your question, like, okay, so the 0.3 times 2 is just 0.6, which is what our latest rendition was. Before we got on, I had a feeling a question like this would come up, and I don't know if I shared my screen, if you guys would see it. Would it?
I hope so. Jay is
Okay.
Jared able to share his screen?
You sure should be able to.
Okay.
The next question is learning how to do that on Zoom. Oh, the big green button. Right.
I was just going to say that.
I'll learn computers someday. Okay. So let me know when this pops up. It's just going to be a PDF. This is the very back page of our alternatives analysis. And on here, what's that? You can see this or not?
We can, you
Okay,
could actually
cool.
enlarge it.
Okay, perfect. So I'll zoom in here. Basically, what I'm pointing to with these two boxes is our line item price that we got when we reached out to a couple of manufacturers for membrane skids. And what I wanted to just kind of convey is the cost saving potential while we increase and decrease price. And there's going to be a caveat on this after I get through explaining these. So the top one there, the quantity is 3 0.4 MGD skids for a complete total capacity of 1.2 million gallons per day. And the price we got from one of those manufacturers, I don't want to name which one because they each sent us a proposal that asked that it be kept private and confidential. I'm happy to send them to Michelle, but since this is such a public forum, I do want to just keep whoever sent these prices confidential for now. But 1.2 MGD was about $1.1 million, and this is just for the membrane equipment, not a permitted public water treatment facility. And then for 2 0.3 MGD, this was in response to, can we make it less expensive? So we said, yes, we can. It will be less expensive from a pure dollar amount, but the 2 0.3 MGD skids for complete and total capacity of 0.6 MGD, $950,000. So at the just equipment level, the savings, I know those are real dollars, but they're probably not what you would expect from reducing the flow rate so much. Now, the caveat I wanted to get to with that, this is just the equipment price of this membrane skid. There will be other realized savings with reducing some of those costs. Similar to if you were to drop a penny and a dime in a pond. They're both going to make waves, and the waves will probably look very similar, but you could, if you had the instrumentation to do so, probably prove that the waves that a dime makes are a little bit smaller than the waves a penny makes. And those waves would be analogous to the supporting equipment that goes around these membrane skids, the electrical gear required to power them. It obviously would be less for less skids producing less water, right? There's less energy required to do that. The complication or the complexity, I don't want to say complication, complexity of the control system, right? It's just one less skid. So there's a little bit of cost savings there. The amount of floor space you need, there's a little bit of cost savings there because maybe the building can get a touch smaller. Nothing's one-to-one. But I did want to say, while the savings here on flow are marginal, also so are savings as we branch out, like, okay, what do we need to actually make this thing work and produce water that we can have a permit to produce. Those are all important things. So just a little exhibit I wanted to share, just kind of frame these discussions of are we providing too much? I've dealt with that before. Is you guys are providing us a platinum solution when a silver solution will do. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm not what I'm trying to do here. So, but discussions of flow rate, we can move them along the scale, and there will be actual real dollar savings there. But I just wanted to show you that it's probably not going to be on the scale that you would expect when you talk about even here going from 1.2 to 0.6 MGD. So,
Thank you.
That was a good demonstration. Thank you. Brian? Got anything?
That answered my last main question.
Here, any more comments? Eric?
Anything from?
Okay. So I'd like to open this up for any questions anybody may have. Go ahead, Lynn.
Lynn Teach, 253 Pine Street. I don't know how many questions I have, but I do have some comments to make if that's okay. First of all, thank all of you and all of you. This has been a long, long time. And nobody's going to be happy no matter how it gets settled. It's kind of like the community plan. Some people weren't, some people were. My figure shows that the bill, average person will have to come up with the actual $1,344 more per year at the $112 quote. I just want to state that so anybody watching it on TV or anybody on Zoom has that rather than all these numbers that have been flying around here tonight. Unfortunately, that's happening at a time when our assessments went up, and so all of our taxes are going up. Also, I have been talking to insurance companies, and Eagle County is one of the higher fire risk companies. So our insurance rates will be going up this year too as your policies turn over. So it's a big bite, and that's probably why there's a lot of concerns. My biggest concern is getting this room filled with more people before this gets settled, because there were in the past a lot more people in here, and they need to realize what this means. Throwing those numbers out there, we have grown for years. Prices will go up. I really don't believe our water bills will ever go down again, because I think the prices of water will go up, but that's yet to be seen. I'd like to see it developed for the people that are here now with a small amount of growth rather than thinking 30 years out, because the people that are here are the ones who are going to be accepting this debt. The people are here are the ones that we need to get this done for to keep this town alive and to keep them having water. I don't know how else to say that, but that's the way it is. Suggestions on getting people in here? Give me some flyers at my store. Give me flyers to take to the other businesses that they can put up in the windows to get the people as they're walking in and out to realize what's happening. I don't know how much it costs to do a door-to-door hanger. I know I almost did not come tonight. I usually watch it at home if there's nothing on there that I think is really serious. But I thought, oh, water, I'll go again. And here I am. How many people realized the discussion was going to be as in-depth as it is tonight? I don't know if it was in this month's newsletter because I haven't acquired that yet. But today's the 7th of February. And how many people really knew how deep a discussion it was going to be? That's what they need to be informed at, that we're getting to the end of this and they need to come if they have anything to say. And I'm willing to do whatever I can to help spread the word. But I want to know what I can do and how I can do it. And I will help. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. All right. Name and address, please.
Lloyd Vasquez, and I live at 61 Toledo in Minturn, and I'm a senior citizen. I'm not getting a raise, but the rates keep going up. But you're going to lose most of the seniors that live here now. They're going to sell their house and move out. And all you're going to have is a bunch of young kids here spending money like they do now and make bigger houses. tear small houses down, build a duplex on it, rent half of it to a second owner, never been here. So what's gonna happen to second owners? Are they gonna pay more for their water if they're never here? That's what I'd like to know. There's a lot of second owners live in Minturn. It don't come once a month, maybe. And they don't pay water. They just pay us flat rate. That's all I gotta say.
Pay for the gallons they use, you're right, yeah.
Special rate for someone.
I think there is. Roy, you are aware that the seniors have a,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, just want to make sure.
I'm just throw it out there.
Oh, yeah, no, I appreciate it too. Robert?
Hi, I'm Robert Creasy at 453 Pine Street. I'm pretty new to the community, only been here a few years, but I was on a board for a water district in California, small town, smaller town, not as small as this town, but about 8,000 people. So I've got a lot of comments to make. I think you're all hitting on really important issues and addressing it well. I think the cost of the ratepayers is a massive concern, and it's a huge number that you're talking about. I think, Lynn, your point about outreach is critical, that the town needs to know when these discussions are happening, and just putting out a notice that it's on the agenda is not adequate. It's important to recognize that basic water needs are tiny compared to irrigation use. And I think you'll probably, I don't know the numbers for Minturn, but I imagine there's a massive jump in the summertime. And I think that's where Brian's hitting on it exactly right. You have to address demand side issues through tiered rates, as the presentation that was given to us earlier. And conservation codes when we have drought, cutting back irrigation to certain days of the week, down to 1 day a week, or none at all if it comes down to it. And that's a way to create redundancy that does protect us. We can still all have water to eat and drink and use the restroom and the things that we really need. I also think that maximizing the groundwater that you have and the surface water from Cross Creek, which are these incredibly clean resources that don't require a lot of treatment, is the best, lowest hanging fruit for you. I mean, if we're only getting 160 gallons per minute from the groundwater, but with our junior rights, we have 320, that doubles our supply. Granted, if the junior rights are called because of a drought, well, then you have to implement those conservation codes. That alone could cover you. So wells go for those wells as quickly as you can. They're cheap. I mean, they're what, $100,000 per well, something like that. And then I think Lynn and Gus, you were also hitting on it right with that sand filter. That allows you to use Cross Creek. That's a really clean water supply. The reason that we're functioning with that sand filter is because it's so clean. And if you do have the groundwater for when you have the turbidity, then you have that redundancy there too. At some point, you're going to need the membrane plant. You can't get around that. But I do think that the cost increases you've seen the last 3 years are an outlying circumstance that came out of COVID. Construction costs for buildings have doubled. So in 3 years, you've never seen that happen before, and it'll keep going up. But you're not going to see it double again, I don't think, in the next 3 years. So if you can wait 5, 6, 8, 10 years with better wells, rehab your sand filter, get your conservation codes in place, you can make it to the point where you are going to start getting connection fees from these other developments. Oh, that's another point. I don't know what your connection fees are. They should be big for new development, new houses coming in, and you should get the developers to pay for it up front, not as each building comes in. If they're developing it, they can take the cost to pay for the increase in our system that we need. That system increase is all because of new growth. Well, that new growth should pay for it, not the existing ratepayers. I think that covers all of it. I'm sure I got some other ideas, but basically it's an all-and approach. you have a lot of great things going for you. The quality of water, the room for demand side management, because none of it's, I mean, I can't believe we don't have any tiered rates yet. That's really easy to do. So encourage you guys to jump on the things you can, like Lynn was saying, like hit those things that are easy right now. And down the road, we got a plan for the membrane, but hopefully by then we'll have more resources. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Robert. Jay, do we have anybody on Zoom that's got a hand raised?
Yes, hold on just a second. We have a panelist, Jared has his hand up, and we have Tracy who is on the audience, and I can turn her on to talk first if you'd like to do it that way.
Why don't you go ahead and let Tracy,
Tracy, go ahead and speak.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time this evening. I know, sorry, my voice is going, but I really appreciate so much your dedication to this, all of you. And I know it's been an ongoing thing, and I try to attend every meeting. I just want to reiterate, I agree with the previous speaker about, the developers coming in. I think there should be, the onus should be on them to provide an additional boost in the cost of this. I also feel that you had mentioned at the beginning that there was 2 users that use, a disproportionate amount of water, and I really think it's important to crack down on that. And then thirdly, this is more of a question, and I'm sure it's been raised given Michelle's attention to detail, but does the state have grants or, and it's probably been discussed, so forgive me, but if you could just maybe recap what resources might be out there, grants for small communities to help with these kind of issues, because water's so pivotal. And anyway, if maybe somebody could address that. And also thank you again, everybody. This is a hard topic, but really important, and thanks.
Tracy, while you're here, could you please state your name and your address?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Of course. Tracy Anderson. I'm at 1016 Mountain Drive in Minturn.
Oh, hey, Tracy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jared?
Sure. Yes, thank you. I wanted to correct something earlier that I heard. And this is also in our report, so it's not new information, but there was, I heard that the membrane plant is not suitable for treating turbidity, when in fact that's what membrane plants are for. So I'll just define turbidity. Turbidity is the measure, the degree or the measure of light scatter passed through a sampled medium. So imagine taking a small film canister that's made out of very clear glass, filling it with a sample of water. You put that film canister into a cylinder and you close the lid, you turn on a light, and then there's a screen on the other side of that canister that measures how much light is getting through and how much is being scattered by the degree of stuff or particles in that water. And so particles are very easily filtered with the membranes that we're talking about. Perhaps what may have been intended was total organic carbon, or oftentimes abbreviated TOC in the water industry. Membranes struggle with TOC, especially, well, they won't do anything for dissolved organic carbon, right? These membranes are, the holes, the pores on these membranes are going to be smaller than the width of a human hair by a factor of almost 50 or 100. And so dissolved components will go right through, but total organic carbon is very much more effectively treated through the process of settling. And so seasonally, Cross Creek experiences elevated concentrations of TOC. That's not uncommon. TOC is organic carbon, right? So during the spring, when you have a lot of biological proliferation, storms running off the riparian areas into the Cross Creek drainage, it's very common to see TOC go up. Nearly every surface water utility deals with this across the country. So strategies to mitigate You could operate seasonally a pre-treatment process at the membrane facility, as described in our report. Pre-treatment in this case would be coagulation and settling, or one of our other options was say, okay, just add more well water. Wells are not as impacted by TOC, right? That's a groundwater source. So what's happening on the surface will not impact groundwater. So those were the two strategies we identified. And then just to kind of go down the rabbit hole, we said, boy, we're relying on these wells to get through a lot of sticky situations. What if we upgraded them to be the sole source of supply for Minturn? And then that's where Bill got involved to help us run through what would it take to make these wells. We did all that well testing. The results are well documented, so I don't want to get into that. But a little bit of backstory on how we arrived at that, and just a slight correction that membrane treatment plants are 100% best available technology for mitigating turbidity, which is a regulated contaminant for surface water.
Go ahead.
So TOC, as I understand it, was the main turbidity issue in the spring for Minturn water. Is that right?
TOC can contribute to turbidity. And so remember, turbidity is the measure of light scatter. So it doesn't measure how many particles or what size of particles are, it just measures how much is the light being distorted as it's passed through here. So turbidity certainly can contribute, or I'm sorry, TOC can contribute to the measure of turbidity, but it's not the other way around, right?
And so adding a pre-treatment module to treat the TOC, which I understand is one of our major water quality issues, would add an additional significant expense to the cost of the water of the membrane plant. And that's something we should eventually plan for, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I would certainly recommend, and probably I wouldn't die on the hill, but I would fight hard to make sure there's at least provisions for future pretreatment at a membrane facility. Like I said, there's strategies to avoid it, right? We still have wells 3 and 4. They still produce water that is generally free of TOC. And so dilution is often a solution there. TOC is not necessarily a regulated contaminant the way we think of it, but it can cause complications in your system that can be a precursor to the formation of regulated contaminants, and that's why it's important to treat for.
And we, as I understand the low bid that we have now, we don't. It would be helpful, I would think, to also see what the cost of adding the treatment package. I guess that's package plant technology. To the membrane plant.
Yeah. So early on in the process, I got an equipment price for a pretreatment module. It was about $500,000. I'd have to really go back and dig into what were the parameters around that. But again, this is just, you write them a check for $500,000 and they say, okay, it's ready to ship. So that's all that $500,000 buys you, is just that equipment on a truck at the factory. So then you got to get it to Minturn, install it, get it powered, get it controlled, get it anchored to the floor on a foundation that's designed to handle that much water in a tank right above it. So all of those cost factors, that's what kind of escalates. Okay, we thought it was $500,000, but by the time we got it producing water for us that was permitted, the cost went up. So you started a $500,000, and it's just going to go up from there. It's not going to be 30 times more than that, obviously. But if I had to, thumb in the air guess, probably between $2 and $5 million to add a pretreatment system to a membrane facility.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Anyone else down the line here?
I just had a question just to tag on to that. The reason we use our wells right now is because our slow sand filter can't treat the TOC during the spring runoff. Is that correct?
I believe so. John, if you're there, the question is use of the wells is primarily in the spring to avoid TOC inability at the sand filter.
Yeah, we definitely saw a lot of TOC. Well, DOC, TOC both going through the sand filter in May, and we switched over to the wells. So that's kind of our strategy right now.
Okay, I just have a question maybe of my fellow council, but if anyone, I think, you know, we're going off at 2019 water CIP, and I think and like I said, there was a lot of public in this room. We've amassed an amazing team of consultants, and I think it would be really helpful, just even based on the feedback of public comments, for understanding of the public to get a big picture of why we're here. Well, it's certainly true that the town is looking at a tiered water rate structure. We do require development to provide taps up front, for example. So I think these are kind of questions that would be helpful for the public to know. You know, and Tracy had a question too about, I'm sorry, Tracy, I can't remember your question, but to have some kind of, and Michelle, actually, I would say this, our staff has been putting out, and it's on the website, Water 101. It's pretty amazing to read. I mean, I feel like we all this has been quite a process, and I feel like I know so much more today, and yet we are just continually learning. But I want everybody to learn with us. So if we can maybe print out those water memos that Michelle has been doing, and to have a better understanding. I mean, all of this is in the packet. There's 4 pieces to this water piece in the packet. One is the 2019 water CIP. And one is a analysis that Gussie and our water committee, Lynn, put together, which is really helpful, looking at rehab of slow sand filter, package conventional treatment plant, and membrane treatment plant, and then the rate structure that Jim Mann did for us as well. So there's so many pictures here to the pie, more than just water rates or consumptive use. We are, you know, I want to keep going back to the fact that we're bumping it up against CDPHE regulations. And, you know, we are tasked with providing a water, you know, enterprise, clean water to our citizens. So I wonder how, if we can print those out, or, you know, and maybe we can leave some at Lynn's store. And as far as direction goes, because none of this has been easy, but I think, you know, it would be helpful for more people to be in the room, and maybe we can do a flyer if, you know, I mean, there was a lot of people, but that was also in response to an interconnect. And it's actually in here, you know, an interconnect with the ERWSD, which they won't entertain apparently, but anymore, you know, is an answer to redundancy. You know, let's see what people are thinking about now when they see the $1,000 increase to their water bill per annual. I mean, thanks for doing that math. I haven't done it yet. How much are they wanting to hang their hats on Holy Cross Water? At some point, if we grow, we're gonna have to use Eagle River water, you know, so. Lots of pieces to the pie. Anybody else have any ideas? That's just where my head is going is.
Well, I think growth helps a lot. Now, I'm not interested, and I don't think anyone else here is interested in the huge amount of growth. We want to make sure we maintain our character. but moderate growth, some people would say is what we originally talked about in the CIP from 2019, was managing a lot of the cost. But, Minturn North is going to bring a pretty good sized amount of money. And water taps, once they get underway, once they pull a building permit, they have to pay off the water taps. I think that was around 750, huh?
680,000.
680,000.
I'm sorry, so that's like $1,000 a tap?
$12,000 a tap, I think, is where we're
Yeah, it
at.
should be double that.
Plus a cash and lieu fee.
We
for
just did, almost.
Seriously.
Plus a cash and lieu fee for odd water.
Plus a system improvement fee based on square footage. So it's broken out into different systems as to how that gets charged.
The system improvement fee is, as you just said, is on square footage, but then you have to wait till the building gets built before you can, they have to pay. But that's a significant amount of money once it starts once it's built out.
Okay, so the tap fee is not the only capital.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Also, I have a question, Michelle. One last question, because it was brought up, the sale of some land for a water enterprise. Is it, or maybe Jay can speak to that. How are we allowed to sell land and then put it into our water enterprise?
Only specifically in the situation of this settlement.
Okay.
The original Battle Mountain agreements back in 2008 were in part for the benefit of the water enterprise. They made promises for new water treatment plants, the wastewater plant, and a variety of things. So Mike Sawyer was very diligent on the front end and did some work with special bond counsel to ensure that the settlement agreement identified the water enterprise fund as a party listed in the agreement. So for the purposes of this specific reason, yes, and Mike, you can correct me if I just was inaccurate in any of that statement.
No, you're correct. Of the agreements that we are in the process of settling with Battle Mountain, one of them was the water service agreement, which required Battle Mountain to build a water treatment plant, and that obligation ran to the water enterprise. And so the settlement agreement provides that the benefits of the settlement accrue both to the town as a general fund and to the water enterprise.
Any more thoughts, questions? As far as addressing the lack of a crowd, we've set up systems to try to notify everybody in like 3 or 4 different ways. But we also have Media 5 stream site. And we can also, with our new software, we can send out a link to that, can't we?
Yes.
For this discussion, so they could view this to very discussion.
Yep.
Okay, so we will make sure we do our email blast with a link to this very discussion, and so that anyone can view it from home. And that's going to be critical to get that word out, and it's we'll try to get that out to everybody as soon as possible. And other than that.
Oh,
Can I?
there's one.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Then teach 253 Pine Street. In talking about Channel 5, I watch it if I miss this. Sometimes I watch it just to hear it so that I understand better. But it used to be on twice a week. I know, and it used to be on Sunday nights at 6 o'clock. Now it's at 9 o'clock. And I do not know the other day it's on. So if you send that out, please send it out when it's available for people to watch.
Okay. You can watch it at your convenience by going to to the website.
I don't do that. And there are people in this town who don't do that.
Okay. I thought
So we need to make sure we're getting everybody, not just people who are real techies.
good point. Good
Because
point.
people like Roy and I are probably not real techies. And there are other people like that in this town. And we can accomplish just as much as you can, continuing on the way we learned. So, you know,
Didn't mean to piss you off there.
no, you're not. I'm just trying, I know I get this all the time, but you know what? I've had a business for 40 years. I am not a techie. I still run my business and I still earn a living by it without doing it in any major amount. I do bits and pieces here, but I don't do major. It can be done. A lot of the people don't come because they come and there's other reasons I won't get into. I'm happy to orally, face to face, approach people and say, please come to the meeting. I'm sure every business in downtown would put a flyer up, just like we do for the market in the summer, just like we do for music in the summer, in their windows to help. That's the kind of thing I'm saying, is going out there and doing it that way, not just computers. A lot of people get at home with families and they get busy and they don't always have time to sit there and do things that way either. This way, I'm giving it to them. I'll try. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think we'll take a recess and then get back to the next item. Okay, we're back. Our next item on the agenda is the water tank number 2 rehab.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just before we get going on that topic, no direction was given to staff from the last discussion. So staff will await further direction. One recommendation I would give to this council is you may want to consider directing your legal counsel to contemplate the complications that may come from extended water moratorium and limiting development opportunities for property owners. So it might be helpful for Mike to start looking into what that may or may not mean. So you may want to give Mike direction and have him take a look at that. We've been in a water moratorium since, Mike, I think it's been since 2020, for 4 years now. And it's only gotten stricter as we've gone along. And I can tell you that development pressure has only continued to increase. As property prices go up and interest in Minturn continues to go up, that pressure has continued to increase. So I think there could be value in Mike reviewing what that may or may not mean. And maybe it means nothing. Maybe Mike says, don't worry about it. I don't know. But I would like to hear that from Mike and not make an assumption by me.
There are considerations with moratoria that don't have targeted end dates, and that's something we'll need to think about.
Said succinctly by the attorney.
Yes, I would like to give direction if there's 4 of my peers that would like to join, or 3 more.
So will you expand a little bit?
No, we're asking him to go look into it.
Oh, okay.
This seems like an executive council issue.
Yeah, we can discuss the topic or the analysis as advice from legal counsel in an executive session.
But we have to give him direction to bring that to us. Right,
Next
in the public
meeting?
forum.
So
Meeting?
Terry, did you move for direction?
I just said if 3 or more of my council members, I would like to give direction to Mike to bring this before us.
Is that, I second that, that's.
ASAP.
I think, does everybody thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Probably gonna take more than one council meeting, but we'll get it put together here in the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Thanks, Mike. All right, and I think with that, Mike can hopefully be done for the evening. So.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, so moving on to Minturn tank number 2, rehabilitation and pressure reducing vault work. Do we still have Jared Limke with us by chance?
Yes, Michelle, I'm here.
Oh, that's great. It was really going to get interesting if I had to start explaining a pressure reduced vault. Although I gotcha. So through a series of situations that have led to us to continually look at this hillside, that is the hillside where we have our tank number 2, which is steel bolted tank. As many of you know from the original 2019 capital improvements plan, our original goal was always to have 2 water tanks. Yeah, the council was always interested in redundancy within all of our water systems, being storage, treatment, distribution. You know, we try for looping whenever we can, the such. So fast forward to getting an estimate for 2 water storage tanks. We were required by state revolving fund to get the estimate before we got the contracted bid. The estimate came to 3 million for 2 tanks. Contracted bid came to significantly more than that. So we ended up getting 1 tank. That 1 tank did not come to the full 3 million. So we have some money left over from the building of the 1 tank. In an effort to try to keep with the original concept of having 2 tanks, now that we have tank 3 in full functionality, and we would not be without water to rehabilitate tank 2, which, you know, to take tank 2 offline originally would have left the town with no storage. John Volk went and got an initial estimate for the lining of the steel bolted tank. This looks like there's promise there. That combined with Jared's analysis of the installation of a pressure reducing vault on Highway 24 so that the 2 tanks can work in synchronicity, if that's even close to an appropriate word for this situation, given that there's 17 feet difference in elevation, would allow for us to use both tanks to their maximum capacities. This is not fully vetted. However, this option would also help solve the issue where we are needing to ensure water service to 2 properties at the top of this hill where tank 2, the steel bolted tank, currently lives. You know, we've been trying to take tank 2 offline, given that it leaks quite a bit, and we're trying to bring our water loss down throughout the system. So this would allow us to fix tank 2, decrease our water loss, maintain water service to these 2 properties at the top of the hill, which the town is required to do per our water service area, and benefit the entirety of the town. The initial cost, and Jared can speak more to this, and Jeff Spinell, who has been getting estimates for just servicing of these 2 properties, which I think will balance out better by doing the bigger project. The initial cost of this is around $750,000. That is ballpark, and that's why we are here to come to all of you tonight, asking for permission to take a deeper dive to understand what this cost would look like, what the timeline would look like, what we would really need to do. So what we're asking for tonight is, 1, we wanted to bring this concept to you. We wanted to have Jared and Jeff Spinell, who have both been doing the deep dive into this. I don't know if we still have John Volk with us right now, who did the deeper dive for the liner of the tank. And then we have Jim Mann with us, who was on the call with State Revolving Fund, who confirmed that we can use the leftover money from the tank loan to cover costs for this project, specifically the pressure reducing vault, not for the liner of tank 2. I said, oh, okay. So with that, I wanted to just bring this general concept to you all. See if there are questions about the general concept. You know, how to have the money man in the room, that's you, Jim. You're the money man. Have Jared with us, water engineer, Jeff Spinell, town civil engineer, and then see if this is something that is, you know, interest to the council, and we can go back and do a deeper dive and then come to you all with a real plan and formal estimates for council to consider.
I move that we do a deeper dive into rehabbing the tank number 2.
I do also, but I do have a question.
Yes.
Is the PRV vault gonna be on our property or on an easement that we have, or are we gonna have to purchase some land for that? Or?
That is the heck of a question. So Gusty right now is looking to be smack dab in Highway 24.
Okay. So it's in an easement.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see how that's going to work.
Jared and Jeff are tasked with finding any place that would be a better location. Yes, it is not ideal right now. That's a really good question. And we would like to find, you know, Highway 24 is not ideal. So.
But I am in favor of going, you know, investigating it and doing a deeper dive for sure.
So is the placement critical for the vault? Does it have to be at a certain altitude in relation to the tanks?
I look to Jeff and Jared to answer that.
Hello, Jared.
Hello. So I am going to, yes, to answer your question, it does need to be at a certain spot. And that spot has to do more with horizontal location than vertical location. So the idea of this specific vault is one answer, and maybe not the best answer, but it's one answer to allowing Minturn full use of the new tank number 3. So I've popped this diagram up, and there's a lot of colors and a lot going on, but don't worry, I will explain it. What we see here in blue, and I'm going to select them from left to right. My laptop's struggling, it's tired, it's had a long day. Moloit Park tank on the top left. Tank number 3, this is the new concrete tank at the water plant in the middle here. And then on the right hand side, we have tank number 2, that steel tank that is up behind those several houses. You guys know where it is. What I've done is I have diagrammatically placed those tanks on a graduated graph here, showing their relation to one another in elevation. And that's important because water is always going to seek its lowest elevation it can get to. Tanks and pipes keep it at elevations we want it to, but if without those restrictions, physical restrictions, that water is going to flow to its lowest possible point. It's going to seek its point of lowest potential energy. So I'm going to zoom in a touch on just tanks 3 and 2, or 2 and 3, because Moloit Park tank has very little, if nothing, to do with this. It's on its own pressure system already. So right now, tank 3 was built or constructed with an additional approximate 15 feet of available volume higher than the overflow elevation at the existing tank number 2. And so what that means is if nothing is done and you go out and you attempt to fill tank 3 to the very top, it's going to overflow tank 2. And what would actually probably really happen is you could just never fill tank 3 above the overflow elevation of tank 2 because they're hydraulically connected in your system right now. So you would never really see this condition. And so that's a bit of a bummer for you because you have all this good tank volume up here that you want to take advantage of. And going back further, all of the water plant designs we considered were relying on this tank for disinfection. And we need all the volume we can get in that tank to obtain adequate disinfection so that you can report to the state that you are disinfecting properly. So obtaining the shaded volume section up here is very important. One, to make sure you're getting everything that you bought, and 2, to make sure that you can provide disinfected water should a water plant go in. So one way to do that is to separate and create 2 pressure zones. One pressure zone would be the tank 3 pressure zone, and the other pressure zone would be the tank 2 pressure zone. This would allow the pressure in tanks number 3 zone to increase, and then tank number 2 pressure zone would be what it always has been. We're able to fill that tank to its overflow technically. So how do we create those 2 pressure zones? That has to do with this red line work down here that I have, calling it the PRPSV vault, pressure reducing, pressure sustaining valve vault. That's what all those acronyms stand for. And it's located on the main in Main Street, the transmission pipe in Main Street, basically disallowing the pressure that's going to be manifested by the extra column of water in tank 3 from getting through to tank 2, right? It's only going to allow a certain, I'm going to make up numbers because I don't know the numbers. Let's say this is if you put a pressure tap on the pipe right where my mouse is, and I'm sorry, I'm moving it around a lot, so I'll leave it there. This is going to be in the tank 3 pressure zone. If that's 80 PSI, perhaps downstream of that is 60 PSI, just because we have less water on top of the pipe being exerted by tank 2. So this valve would not let any more than 60 PSI get to this side of the pressure zone. And so that's what's kind of shown here with this blue line that I just selected. It may be hard to see, but that blue line represents the pressure energy being exerted in the distribution system by the water column in the various tanks. So it's not so much, it's an extra 7 PSI maybe in the new tank 3 pressure zone. That's very manageable. Most customers won't even notice it because they might be on pressure reducers already, or pressure regulators at their system anyway. And then I highly doubt we are at any kind of critical transitionary point where adding an extra 7 PSI would seriously cause undue harm to distribution system infrastructure. That doesn't mean the risk is completely not there, but an extra 7 PSI, if I was very, very concerned about it, I would have a lot more reservations to recommending this to you. So just know that there is a risk there that, yes, we are adding more pressure energy to the distribution system. More pressure means older gaskets might leak more often or break, but it's 7 PSI. That's not that much in the scheme of things. So that's addressed. That horse has been beat. So this is one potential solution. The entire reason for this red drawn pressure reducing vault is to allow Minturn full use of tank number 3 without overflowing, or even just full use of tank number 3 in concert with the use of tank number 2. Any questions on that?
So, looking at the fact that the main is in the middle of Main Street, can you take can you place it on the line that's going up to the old tank, the tank 2? Can you put it
Good question. Yeah, good question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. It's a single in and single out tank, and this pressure reducing valve is monodirectional. So it's only going to allow flow in a single direction. So we could fill the tank once and then no water would ever come back out if we were to install this system on the pipe going up the hill.
It doesn't mean that everything south of the vault will be serviced by tank 3 and everything north of the vault will be serviced by 2, though, does it? Or is that
It does.
exactly what it is?
Yep,
That's what it means.
That's what it does. Yep, exactly. So I can, and we do not have an exact location. This is kind of the reason for looking into doing more investigations on this. But if I were to share my browser, I have Google Maps up, kind of in the vicinity. Actually, I don't even need to do that. I got my own figure, but that's okay. I'm sorry for bouncing around here. I forgot we had this figure. This figure is better because it shows your infrastructure. So all I did was scroll up in that same figure there. So what we're looking at now is a lot of workshop line work on here. I'm going to delete it for the purpose of our discussion while you guys kind of get oriented, but it's kind of a zoomed in view. of Minturn. I presume you guys kind of know where you're at relative to this tank right here, and then Highway 24 up top here. So it's important that we install that valve represented by this symbology right here, the red and black bow tie, as it's been affectionately called. It needs to be south of the outlet to tank number 2 up on the hill. And so to answer your question, yes, water here, everybody to the south of this valve would be on tank number 3. And then everybody to the north of this valve would be on a mixture of obviously tank 2 and 3, because technically water from tank 3 could get north of this valve. That's ideally what it's going to do. But really the pressure that people will see will be whatever the pressure is being manifested in tank number 2. Sorry, there, I'll stop moving that around, but hopefully that answers your question.
And the pressure is not gonna change it. It was always.
Not north, correct. Yeah, it'll always be what it always has been. The people that will see a change to pressure are the ones to the south of where this valve ultimately gets installed. And those folks probably won't even notice the pressure increase. The only person that will notice the pressure increase might be John Volk, because it's distribution side pressure.
Could it be all the way up at tank 3? All the way down?
Could the valve be up at tank 3?
Yeah, or Malloy Park.
No, this is. That's Kings Ranch Road.
The question, Jared, is can the valve be up higher towards tank 3? Like, he means tank 3 down by Malloy Park, the new tank. He's saying, can you back up the valve?
Let me
further?
think of that. Yeah, so, well, let me think about that. So that would be really back near the water plant.
Yes.
Where are you in the land?
I think it probably could be. I guess just, yeah, the reason we were always putting it on there is because that's the figure that we've been looking at for some time relative to its use of tank 2. So I guess, yeah, looking back, if this pressure differential were to be done, let's say, on your property at the water plant with a new vault there, that gets rid of the complications of putting the vault in public right away. Puts it back in a location that's more easily accessed by town personnel. So what that would do, it certainly would allow us to fill tank 3 as high as we wanted, and then the pressure in the system would remain as it always has been at that overflow elevation for tank 2. So yes, preliminary answer to that question is yes, we could locate this vault back by the water plant on the main as it goes out to town without any changes to anything in town. So that would be a good solution. The infrastructure inside that vault would still remain the same. We would need all of the infrastructure we have, I'm pretty sure, before I dive into that some more. I'd have to want to think about that. But so I just heading off the question is how much would it cost if it was not in public right away? I think mechanically assume the same infrastructure for now.
There is another reason it might be at that. I mean, I just want to make sure we're not overlooking something, but that's also a proposed loop area that we don't have currently that we need for our system that comes up Boulders to the end of Boulder Street. Who knows what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Do you? There's no loop on Boulder right now, I know, but that's where a redundant loop should be. And that could tie in with that vault. Is there a reason?
That would have nothing to do with this vault.
It would have nothing.
The one thing I would add though, Jared, is we're working on the pedestrian improvements in Highway 24 right now. So we're looking at as-bills and where that water line actually lies in the highway. And we can look, you and I need to get together and look at it, because not far from where you originally showed that, the water line tends to drift towards the west, if you will, towards the bottom of that drawing. and it gets out of the travel lanes of Highway 24, which is gonna greatly reduce the traffic impacts and traffic control required to do this. There's room in the right of way to put it without getting into the highway itself.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, one of the bigger complications was, digging a giant hole.
In the
Right
highway.
in or adjacent to a highway, yeah, so.
When Minturn North comes online and adds, keep forgetting the number, but a bunch of new taps and, would it make sense to divide the distribution system like that for future growth north of town? So that you're not spreading out the 60 PSI over a greater area. I don't know, does it make sense from a pressure standpoint to have them equally spaced? Or like, that's gonna, but actually no, the motor tank part is gonna service the school districts. That doesn't affect that.
Right, yeah, because Maloit Park's on their own system. They get pumped water from the plant. So it's just tanks 2 and 3 that need to work together. So, so if we were to, instead of installing this valve here, this pressure reducing valve here, and install it back closer at the water plant, just downstream of the outlet to tank 3, then again, there would be essentially no change to the distribution system in Minturn as it is today, because right now tank number 2 is setting the hydraulic grade line in the distribution system, and tank number 3 is approximately half full.
Jared, I think it's important that the council understands that this only affects the water pressure. The entire town still gets the advantage of the volume of both tanks.
Yes.
Sure.
So
Correct.
by doing this and rehabbing tank 2, we actually get the benefit of a tank and a half. Is that right?
Actually, you'll have almost 2 full tanks because they're both right at 600,000 gallons.
I mean, the benefit of additional.
Oh, yeah.
Tank and a half,
Yeah,
because we
the
only
other-
get to use half of the tank right now.
But they're still using the one tank that's up at Dina's is just leaking, so. But
Okay.
This increases your storage volume back to where you originally wanted
to be, yeah.
Reduces your losses.
This seems like a really good thing.
And to
Question, Robert.
close out
Just-
the.
It reduces your losses too, because if it's a leaky tank, that's water.
Very leaky.
That goes without saying.
It's an outdoor shower right now.
That's another one of those low hanging fruit, like boost your losses.
It's an outdoor shower. Yeah, that's how we built the new tank.
And redundancy.
Any other thoughts or questions for
Look at it.
anybody? I think we're all on board.
I think we got direction for staff.
Cool, a short discussion. Okay. So no more. So have we given direction?
Clarification, is that number 7,500 or 750,000?
750,000.
Okay, so the decimal point, top one, okay. Verify. So that, obviously the new tank, it's in the thing. Fines, this didn't work out for a new taller tank, and this is a better.
Well, so Jared had actually reached out to a couple of tank manufacturers to try to get estimates, which, Jared, I didn't want to burst your bubble, but I thought it was pretty obvious that new tanks were going to be like multi-millions. And we knew that, but we wanted to have numbers for you nonetheless. But so new tanks would be multi-millions. So this was an option that would come in at a price that would not increase water rates.
So we'll have also life expectancy on the liner.
Yeah, you know, John Volk is still on the line and I felt like, John, you gave us a life expectancy of the liner at one point. I felt like it was 20 plus years.
I think so. We've had one in service for over 10 years in Breckenridge without any leaks in it.
And this steel bolted tank, I think, is 20 something years right now. If I recall.
It was in the 90s when there was
90s, okay, yeah,
96, yeah.
96. It's almost 30.
Okay, any further questions? Everybody ready? Good? Okay, well, and Jim is here. Do we need to have anything to ask of him?
That's a question for you.
Anybody?
If you had any questions for Jim pertaining to costs associated with this option, given that it's coming out of the water tank loan that we're already paying on, I wanted Jim to be available in case you had questions.
More for future reference, I'd like to kind of know what O&E would look like for the vault. Just to kind of understand what our ongoing costs are, but I don't need that answer tonight. That's more for the future.
Okay. Good night, guys. Thank you for your help. It was great.
Alrighty, thank you. Take care.
And next agenda item is future agenda item. I think discussion with Mike or executive session with Mike on water moratorium concerns. Any other things that anybody want to add?
I'm wondering if we should take a dive into the cost of fixing our wells as are replacing them without moving them. It seems we're going to have to do that.
Yeah, well, we're compromised now anyway, so it's definitely needing some help.
And drilling more too could be.
So who would do the estimating on that, Bill or Jared?
Okay. Should we add an NFC discussion, just kind of direction?
Not yet.
Sorry, what?
Not yet.
We're not there yet, I don't think, anyway.
Okay, so. No, I think we're done with future agenda items. Any chance we could get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Always happens. Motion, I guess, second by Eric. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I've never had anybody oppose either.
There were several people.